Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, episode 134. Excited tonight to talk to Steve Campbell. Steve and I go way back, 40-some years, I'm going to guess. But let me say just one thing about our fact checker. I can only say that if we went through all the mistakes I make, we would break our record. We would be the longest podcast just going through the mistakes. The great Ben Shelton, what a player. Todd Witzkin was his uncle, not his brother-in-law. Uncle on his mother's side. Let me just say that Sabatini was a great player at 15. I made the mistake between singles and doubles, but if you just Google her background, amazing. But let's get going. I'll give Steve a call, and I think that gets us rolling. If I can do this. The machine is only as smart as the operator. Got to start again. Dialing. And there's a pause in the action. Slow motion.
Hello, this is Steve.
Steve, you're the good. I'm the good-looking Steve. You're the better-looking Steve. You're the guy with the full head of hair.
Yeah.
You look a lot younger than you are, but you're not on video. The poor people watching this, if they do string a racket, and I know some people do that, they got to look at me.
There was actually a song that says, "Hello, me, meet the real me." So I don't know which that is, but yeah.
Well, so many things to talk about. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your Beetle room first. Let's go through that. I was fortunate to be a guest in your house, Wintergreen Resort, Wintergreen, Virginia, where you are now. But several years ago, with your wife Colleen, the two of you were running Kapalua, a beautiful place in Hawaii. But tell us about the rock and roll room you got.
Well, I'm pretty much a child of the '60s, I'd say, and I still can't turn loose of the music or the visuals of it. So I'd say I've still got a lot of those qualities still in me, but no, not necessarily the free love since I'm married now, but all the rest of it, I did big Beatle fan, and I schlepped a lot of that material around with me, on our journey from Texas to Hawaii to now Virginia. So it's my little bit of, I guess, childhood history I keep preserved there.
Well, listeners, one of his guest rooms, it is a museum, a tribute to the Beatles. Posters and photos and records. It's quite a collection you have.
Yeah, thanks. But yeah, I think I've had a lot of that stuff since I was a kid in Texas. I mean, I used to collect all that kind of stuff, and I've just, like I said, growing up in Texas, we all like rock and roll. I mean, went to school in Austin too, so music's a big part of our life. And Texas as is other places, but we are kind of partial to Tex-Mex and Texas kind of music there.
The Yellow Rose of Texas.
Yeah, and Tyler too, right?
Yeah, Tyler, Texas, the rose capital of the world. I know sometimes we in the U.S. will say the capital of the world, but it might be just the rose capital of the U.S. You used to be able to buy a dozen roses on the side of the road for $1. I one time went to a wedding, and I took 50 dozen roses. And I had you couldn't do that today. I had two buckets of water, and the wedding was on Martha's Vineyard, and so I had my carry-on I was carrying 2 buckets, and I had some water in them. But when I finally got to the Boston airport to get on the small airplane, you had to be weighed, and they told me I couldn't take the 2 heavy buckets of water. They weren't that heavy, about halfway full, and anyway, I just said, no, I have to take these. Let me just empty the water. And then, what I did when I got to the wedding, and the listeners, the roses, it was just buds that they would bloom after you have them for a couple days, fill out or whatever the technical term would be, but that's my story of being in Tyler, Texas. That's where you and I met.
Wow.
Let me read this for our listeners. I went back to a telephone text that you sent to me, and it said, "Tennis, past, present, and future. I have gratitude for the gifts tennis has given me: exercise, confidence, commitment, concentration, honesty, courage, competitive spirit, work ethic, friendships, travel, laughter, a career, wife, family, and at the end, the opportunity to give back to others." But yeah, with that, that's fantastic. Tell us about your start in tennis. We go back to the beginning.
I think, boy, that's going back decades now. But it's my mother. When I was about 10 years old, she took some tennis lessons and with some ladies. So this is in Waco, Texas, and she, needed somebody to hit with after her lessons. And so she had dragged me out to the courts, and I hit with her a bit there. I'm sure it was ungodly, terrible. And I know for a fact nobody videoed it. We didn't even do any analysis on that. But she ended up getting me some lessons too. So I took lessons from a gentleman, Charlie McClary, there in Waco, who later on, I guess he started the Texas Tennis Hall of Fame. It was at Sol Ross Tennis Center, which was later on named after him. It was called Charlie McClary Tennis Center. Did you ever go there?
I went through the Texas Tennis Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
I was there for a tournament. But that was a long time ago.
Yeah. But Charlie, he was my original, I guess, I wouldn't say necessarily coach, but I took lessons with him. And prior to that, I got to roll it back a little farther, is I took some lessons with a guy who actually played for Baylor. Can't remember his name, but all I know is my arm would just be killing me when I went home. And it just didn't feel right because it just didn't, I couldn't even lift a glass of milk to my mouth. And basically, I think he was just banging balls with me. And I probably went through that for, a few months. And then I think Charlie probably caught an eye of that, I was really into it and all. And then he offered to give me some lessons. Maybe he probably saved my arm, for sure. So that's kind of how I got with him. So, but over time, I got to playing so much that, I outlasted my mom and surpassed her. And so had to keep pushing forward. So played pretty much all through juniors, but during that time I was also playing baseball and football. That's kind of keen down there in Texas. And I think when I was 14 is about when I gave up baseball. I was literally sitting in the dugout, and I love tennis already. I've been, playing, 4 years or plus there. And I thought, well, I got 3 chances to hit the ball once, and half the game I'm sitting in here. And it was just like, it's kind of like put me in the game deal. That just didn't feel like the sport for me. And
I always think of football players. I mean, the interior linemen, sometimes, most of the time, a game goes by, perhaps even a season goes by, and they don't get to touch the ball other than the odd fumble. But in tennis, especially if you're playing singles, I mean, every time, if you're serving, the ball's in your hands, and hopefully if they don't double fault, now right away the ball's in your hands.
Yeah, exactly. And I just wasn't much of a bench guy. And then in high school too, the first 2 years of high school, I was playing tennis for the tennis team. It was Midway High School in Waco. And I was playing football too. Well, the football second string didn't get to play much, and it's kind of the same thing. I just want to play. I'm just not much of a bench guy. And so when I gave it up, I told my buddies that I was going to just play for tennis. I had to go through a little period of where they kind of made fun of me because those were in the days of the white short shorts. And so, they just couldn't understand why I was going out for tennis and not staying with the football. But I'm glad I made that choice because later on when I went back to some reunions, a lot of those guys were kind of beat up and, they asked me what I'm doing. I said, well, doing tennis, and they're just stunned by it. And I said, well, you could still pick it up. And but I'm glad I took that path.
When I first went to Texas, going back to Charlie McCleary, he was an elder statesman, and I just knew him for that he set up the Texas Tennis Hall of Fame. But what was his background? Was he a club coach mostly, a high school coach, combination?
A little combination, but it's when it was, the USLTA at that time too. It was a days of white tennis balls and wood rackets. And that's kind of the era I grew up playing in. And I do remember that, he always had a lot of the tennis world or world tennis magazines in his shop. He was really great at, like, it was kind of a hangout then, and he would let me use the ball machine if nobody was around, to hit with. But basically I was just kind of a park rat there. I had my mom drop me off down there at Sul Ross on Saturdays and tell her I'd call her, when I'm ready to come home. Sometimes I'd pack a lunch, sometimes walk down to, I think like there was like a Wiener Schnitzel or something like that and go get a lunch. But basically I just hung out and would hit with anybody. It didn't really matter. And there was a group of boys that actually all of us used to hit that it wasn't really organized at all. I mean, it was just, you guys want to play doubles, or we'd make up games. And, I didn't really play it wasn't the planned drills like there are today. It was just play. And, I do my lessons and play. And
I'm sorry, Wiener Schnitzel, that was the place that just sold hot dogs only, right?
Yeah. Not the best dietary thing, but somehow I've survived that.
Yeah, we all did. I mean, with I think back in the day with Wonder Bread and Hostess cupcakes and just Velveeta cheese. Yeah, not letting the players drink water, and if you did drink water, you had to drink it out of a bucket. But I can remember on the campus that we were on Tyler, Texas, beautiful campus. Across it, there was a Wiener Schnitzel, if I'm saying that correctly. And when I was there, someone robbed it. Two guys robbed it. Maybe I shouldn't say that, give people ideas. They robbed it by foot. Yeah. And I'll just never forget that. That was like, whoa, really? Oh,
well. Yeah, I think, what a great life I've had, because I was thinking about, like, we had hit against, I'd hit against the ball, against the backboard and the ball machine. But the player I always felt like I was playing, as a kid, you kind of dream up who you're playing, is Rod Laver. And, there wasn't that much tennis on television then, but when it was just the big events, Wimbledon, US Open. And, I thought I'm playing Rod Laver. And then years later, when I think I was in my 50s, we invited Rod Laver to come to our club. This is in Denver. And, I got a chance to meet him, hit with him, and play against him, with and against him in this kind of exhibition type thing. And I'm just, to this day, I'm still stunned that I went from playing him as a backboard against, meeting him in person. So it was, he was a big part of the reason I played tennis too. I just thought he was just cooler than all get out. It was just,
Laver, a young junior, and it's fantastic. I'm telling her to watch these matches of old players. To watch a Rod Laver, an all-court player like that. My Rod Laver, I want to go back to the USLTA, but I have, the title of the book, everything reminds me of something. I was out in El Paso, and I did one of these marathon 4-day clinics, and they actually had the people were very nice, and they had two coaches. And I just had them feed and film. I filmed everybody in the clinic. But so, as you know, you go out and so I was doing the rest of it on my own. And if there was one, there was 60 players. So on the way back, a little punch drunk, I was flying to the US Open, and I didn't change my wristwatch. Going from one time zone to the next, going back east. And I usually would never do this, but Rod Laver, I walked by him, he's sitting, just waiting for an airplane, and I just go, Rod Laver, and just sat down and said, I was just seat taking, trying to be a little bit polite with the rocket, and Anyway, it came down to, I started asking him some questions. He's so humble. He said, well, I wouldn't be able to play today. And I said, no, you need to go to night back. I said back then, this is many years ago, to the point where I said to you, you go to YouTube. And he said, no, but my nephew does. And I said, well, have him take you to YouTube and watch Laver versus Connors, 1975. And and I just threw it at him, and I said, well, there was a reason that Jimbo, I think it was 3 days before, maybe 2, but there was certainly altitude in Vegas, but not that high. I mean, I know you've spent a lot of time in the Rocky Mountains with high altitude tennis, but it's just fantastic tennis. And Laver was almost, semi-retired at the time. It was where Connors beat Rosewall convincingly in '74, the first at Wimbledon, at the US Open, and I think Bill Reardon, his agent at the time, might have made it up, but he came off the court and supposedly said, get me Laver. And it's fantastic tennis. But with that, I just think about talking to Laver. So, I mean, I thought, because of having not changed my watch, I go, gee, I'm going to have 2 hours, but I just had a solid hour. I'd met him many times before that, but just had a solid hour just to talk to him. And
like you said, he's very delightful. It was very humble. Just so easy. But when I first talked with him, when he came to my club, I was like, here I am, like I said, 40 years old. And I reverted back to the way I felt about him as a 14-year-old. I was so nervous to talk to him when he walked in. I usually don't get that nervous anymore about stuff like that. But I was meeting with one of my childhood heroes there.
Well, for the kids listening, he wore the mushroom cap, and he knew the thermal receptors because he would have a wet piece of cabbage or lettuce in his hat to help him remain cool. Obviously, a couple pieces of lettuce is not very heavy. And, he knew the thermal receptors. He used to wear the wet bandana. But no, I mean, just to watch him play, his footwork, the ability to go forward. And our number one mentor, Vic Braden, he had all sorts of Rod Laver stories where, if the racket was missing, by 8 inches, he thought he was doing great. He always talked about a story. It's in his book on mental tennis where he's playing Cliff Richie, and that was back in the CBS, supposedly winner take all. Just like the Reardon matches were supposedly winner take all. They found out later they weren't. But he cracks the passing shot at 4-all, and he catches the net, tape, and goes out. And Vic was doing the TV going, Laver must be devastated. He went to interview him afterwards, and the Rocket said, no, did you see how I lined that up? I had it. I just missed it just needed to nudge it a little higher. He never nudged the ball in his life. I mean, he just ripped everything. Mm-hmm. But
that's a very true story, because I've heard Vic say that a lot. And it's the funniest thing about how life is because there I got a chance to meet Laver. I watched him on television. I hear Vic as the commentator. 14 years old, U.S. Open's on. I rush home. I know the matches are on, and the voices in the background doing the commentary is Vic. And if you had told me when I was 14, 16 years old that later I'd be working with that gentleman, I would have said, no, not a chance. That's the beauty of life, is that you can follow your bliss. And, my bliss has been, tennis and all. And it's just really taken me on some pretty cool journeys there. But yeah, I would have never thought I would have ever worked for Vic. And that was my introduction to Vic, is just hearing him doing the commentating, But I always loved his commentating too. I just distinctly remember it seemed like good information even as a kid. So.
Oh, I mean, with the juniors, with Rod Laver and his brothers, they didn't call him Rocket because he was from Rockhampton. They called him Rocket with the Aussie humor, sarcasm, because he hit he couldn't crack an egg. When he was really little, he couldn't hit the ball. But they actually, with the wheelbarrow and the shovels, they had their own sand court. So it's like he really did have a chance to play on clay, which most Australians, that's just not the case even now versus back then. But they went from one ant pile to the next, and they built their own tennis court.
And Nuke, I got to throw Nuke in there too. That was another player I always really liked as a kid. I mean, when those days were the days of serving and volleying. I didn't really have ground strokes, had continental grip, so it's kind of worthless. But being that I played baseball, I had a serve, and being that I played second base, I had hands, so I could volley, and so I really didn't have ground strokes. So, I just try to go to the net, and like Charlie used to say to me, he said, "It looks like you want to get on and off the court as quickly as possible," but it's basically just because I didn't have anything else. And so Nuke was a big hero of mine. And then later on, when he retired, I'd go down to his camp there in New Braunfels, usually before sectionals that was usually held in San Antonio, and the better players would all meet in New Braunfels for a couple of weeks before sectionals. And that was the deal where you just go down there and play and sweat and feel like you're dying out there. But I think when I was 18 was the year that Nuke retired, and he was actually down there a lot at New Braunfels. And so, I got to meet him, talk with him too. Another thing I just never would have thought, when you're a kid watching people on television, that you'd see these people in person, get to know them,
I used to say about Newcomb's second best logo in tennis. He had that big mustache, and and his logo is like one eye was winking, and he had the big mustache. But the best logo I thought was Mr. Hopman's with all the flags and the kangaroo in the middle.
Yeah. But I think the Aussies and the Texans are kind of kindred spirits. I think there's the same little kind of beer drinking, rebellious, kind of just get in there and grind in the dirt type mentality. That I think that's probably why he put that place there.
Well, at one time, Texas, maybe it still does. It had four of the top 10 populated states in the U.S., but it's like 98% rural, miles and miles of Texas.
Yeah.
No, I always think of Clarence Mabry with our 7 concepts. The red, yellow, green comes from the Clarence Mabry. It's called it was written by Clarence. It's a John Newcomb family tennis book. And I think, and I'm sure that Clarence Mabry was taught that, just like, someone like a Charlie McCleary. That's what we're trying to do, is carry the torch from tennis teachers from the past. And like the other day, I was watching Rick Macy. We had Jacob Hansen on a couple weeks ago, and he worked for Peter Burwash, and I saw Rick doing Peter Burwash drills. And the tennis world's so small. With Joy, I don't know her maiden name, but Rick's, I believe it was her first wife, is Joy Macy. She worked for PBI. Yeah, so many things are just connected with Newcomb. The big joke when he would be at his camp demonstrating is that everybody laughed when he said, "I'm going to demonstrate my topspin backhand." He had almost a forehand grip on his topspin backhand, but back in his day. True. Back in his day, 3 of the 4 Grand Slam served, and he was known for maybe having the best second serve at the time. Did you get to see Nuke demonstrate the backhand?
Yeah, actually I did. And like you said, those grips. Now I'm more educated now than then, and
you and I, the listeners, we're both in our 60s. I'm the older guy, but I can remember watching John McEnroe play the Orange Bowl and thinking, no, I'm only a couple years older than McEnroe, so he's 18, and I'm just studying tennis, and I'm going, now he doesn't hit his ground strokes big enough, and 6 months later he's in the semis of Wimbledon. With the Nuke, I think of that's amazing. Like if the listeners, the juniors, even if you just took 10 minutes, you could watch Jimmy Connors play 75 against Australia against Newcomb, and they were giving Connor the gears. They thought some calls went his way, and get our fact checker on it, but I'm 100% sure, 99, that Connors intentionally double faulted twice in the match. That's how confident he was. And he also, that second year, after having an amazing year in 74, won 3 of the 4 Grand Slams, wasn't allowed to play the French. But Jimmy was a little overweight too. And towards the end of the 74, no, it was 75. I'm sorry, 75, where he wasn't 100% when he lost to Ashe. Don't want to take away anything against Arthur Ashe, but from an injury standpoint. That's getting way out there on a tangent. Let me come back to USLTA. I think we talk in length about Vic. I know you had the opportunity to do so many things with him. But I was with Vic when the USTA called him up and asked him because Vic had the USTA, the United States Tennis Academy, ran it twice a year for coaches. And they asked him if he would change the name of his program because they wanted to become the USTA and drop the L. And Vic said, yeah, okay. There was no like, okay, maybe I could sell it to you for $100 or something. But actually back with Laver, there was a lot of Aussies that were in the Newport Beach area. And Rod Laver lived right down the street, and he practiced at the John Wayne Tennis Club. So I know that Rod Laver and Vic certainly spent a lot of time with each other. Being filmed and just, Yep.
No, he's for sure one of my heroes. Just class too. I think those were the era. A lot of those guys had such class, and I think going drinking beers and stuff together afterwards. I mean, they hung out together too. I mean, it wasn't quite the same.
The Aussies, mother's milk, low to high, low to high, and swallow through. There's a story. I had a chance to get to know Roy Emerson way back when because he was coaching at the Jack Kramer Club right down the street from Vic's place, and I'm going to guess 1966. He played in the Wimbledon final. He never went to bed. They stayed out. Of course, they were playing for a gift certificate. Times have changed.
Yeah. Good.
Let's talk a little bit more about baseball.
Yeah.
We got a grandfather who's going to join us this summer at Wintergreen. We'll talk about how I'm going to join you at Wintergreen. But I was on the court the other day.
Looking forward to it.
On the court with his likewise on the court with his 7-year-old grandson, and he's coming along, and I was showing the dad, so it would have been the grandfather's, get this right, son-in-law. They were playing tennis baseball. You catch the ball and you throw it back, and like two little 7-year-olds are much better off to one be the human ball machine and just catch it. And I was explaining the drill to the father, and he just said, yeah, you just got to, because the kid was letting the ball bounce and going over his head. And I said, no, you got to go in. It's got to be bounce catch. And the dad goes, yeah, you just short hop it. But talk a little about baseball for a second. That's gone away because we used to be able to use baseball, terminologies, analogies to teach tennis. What comes back to your mind as far as baseball, kids not playing it today, and what you could learn from baseball to be a better tennis player?
I think number one is just being outside. Just being outside. I said growing up as a kid, everything was outside. I didn't do things inside really. Everything was outside, and throwing and catching, all of those motions. I mean, that's what I said. It translates so easy to tennis, and I've always felt like when I run across kids that are baseball players that are starting to play tennis, that's a pretty easy transition to make. They've got the hand skills, and especially playing infield, you get really quick hands, and like I said, the short hop or taking a ball on the rises, all those skill sets are super, super important. And I do like the idea of, crossover sports instead of just totally specializing. I mean, I think, like I said, there was a point where I kind of did make that transition, but my whole upbringing, I did all kinds of sports and different things. And it just, like I said, it's good. I think that makes you a better athlete, complete athlete.
Yeah, just playing catch. I can remember I'm going to work. I wanted to watch Ronnie Meyer teach tennis, and I mentioned him before on our podcast. He was a go-between where Nick Bollettieri and Harry Hobbin, they worked at the same facility. Mr. Hobbin was in charge of the juniors and Nick in charge of the adults. But the gentleman running, it was just great. He got the tennis crew to play softball against the the kitchen crew and the tennis crew, they have a softball game. With my mother used to say, I love how you said playing outside. My mother, we'd go through a neighborhood and she'd say, the kids must be inside playing with a butler. And that was a long, long time ago. But now it's just, I mean, that's one great thing about Canada is that the Canadians are still outside playing street hockey. Work with a lot of Indian tennis players here in the U.S. There's so many Indian families are here that have the academic credentials to come over and work as an IT. And one of the dads, he said, "Well, my kid's a house cat. He needs to become a street cat." And I like that. It's interesting how things remind you of. My son Connor played a lot of doubles with Peter Cobelt, and I remember doing some video with Peter. And so anyway, long story short, I end up in Cobelt's home, and it's right outside of Columbus. I think it's a place called New Albany. And they had the fattest cats in the house. I mean, you just like stop and look at them, and it's like each cat looked like they were 25 pounds overweight. And but that's another thing that's gone away is that the term fat cat. He's a fat cat. And with it's amazing where coming back to the playing tennis, baseball is kids they can learn strategy, learn defense. It's mostly all baseline to baseline. We tell kids, no, don't throw the ball behind your back and don't throw it underhand. Just like you're out in center field and you're throwing it up over home plate, and they have a lot of fun with it. But the kid who's catching the ball, and also too is we add variables to it. The kid's catching the ball. He's got to time the ball so it doesn't get over his head, as I said, and be able to throw it. But I think also too the little kids serving. You say serve from anywhere. Once the point's over, just serve from anywhere and aim anywhere. It's too bad that little 7-year-old kids, when they play a game of tennis, that they have to serve in the box. And
I totally agree.
That's where there's so many people who love the game and administrators, but if someone hasn't been a trench pro and they're out there really working with little kids, like a lot of college coaches. My advice to college coaches over the years is whatever you do is just don't stop teaching beginners. Always teach beginners, because it's a skill set, and if you don't do it, you don't do it. But no, that's where the kids go palm up. And back in the day, it wasn't fair for girls, but most boys, like myself, I could catch and throw. I couldn't hit because one, we never practiced. But it was the kid who could hit would be the one who's the dad would get out there and just throw him ball after ball. But yeah, as you said, pretty tough thing to do, hit a baseball.
Yeah, I think about like your backboard. I mean, like in baseball, I actually, we had that little netting thing with the springs on it. There were, practice pitching against that. I mean, it's the similarities in sports they're all over there. But I think for kids, I don't even remember where kids would be like my contemporaries is, when I was in my preteens, that we would dodge playing each other. We always wanted to play, and it's the game of playing. And we didn't get upset, win or lose. We just, hey, let's play. And that we'd come off the court, everything's good. It wasn't. It didn't have that epic of where you're upset, and pissed off, and crying about stuff, or frustrated. We just play another one. If you lost, well, hey, let's challenge again. I'll play you again. And that's the language, as of junior tennis, which wasn't too long ago. You go to a tournament and, well, I'm playing a 5-star. I had a really tough draw. I had to start with a 4-star, and now it's all UTR. But for the parents listening, try to de-emphasize score. The 5 S's: self-management, strokes, strategy, stats, and there's numbers for all of them. And the last one is score. Most people forget 1 through 4. And we play a lot of pickup soccer, pickup basketball, a game we call lightning ball. Actually, who Hubert Crash learned from David Schneider, who was a coach at Texas. And it's just ultimate frisbee with a tennis ball. So you play these different games, and they say, okay, then we're going to go to lunch. Say it was a basketball game. Kids they don't remember even who's on their team, who won. They argue, perhaps, or definitely when they're playing.
say you have a dozen kids and they play 6-on-6 basketball, 6-on-6 soccer. But if they're playing sets, you take them to lunch. When they get back, they know the score of every match or every set. Who won, what was the score, and that's unfortunate. It all when it comes to junior tennis, the competitive side, it is about winning in the end. But we like to say winning's not confusing; it's totally confusing. Let me go ahead.
I had one other thing. Is that I had a guy I hit with my high school. I played one singles my freshman year. All through high school, I played number one. But there was a fellow, and his name was Bob Cervinka, and he went and played for Baylor. So when he was a freshman at Baylor, I was a freshman in my high school. And all 4 years through high school and his 4 years of college, we would play pretty often on Friday nights. We would play. He was such a mentor to me too, that we would play a match on Friday night. And I had girlfriends that would want to go out, and no, I got to play Bob first. So when we first used to play, he would just destroy me. It'd be love and love, and like I said, couldn't get enough pain. I'd say, let's play one more, and he'd still beat me. But by the time I was a senior in high school, and he was a senior at Baylor, there's occasionally I could take him in a match. Most of the time, it was real competitive. And my hats have always been off to that guy for taking me under his wing a bit to whoop up on me. But it also gave me a good sense of competing. But also I kind of learned how to lose too.
No,
I lost a lot.
That's a great story. I think with kids get programmed out. They just they don't play sets. They don't call people up. They're not. It's not the youth versus veteran match where a kid calls up an adult, and there's not enough tennis played. I remember practicing with a baseball player. It was a lefty, and it was just great to play him because it was tough. He had a tough serve. You want to have that serve coming to me a different way, and baseball. Yeah. It was at one point, number one in the States. I think it's certainly, I would say football is probably the most popular sport. But let's move ahead here. You were at Austin, at the University of Texas. When I met you, you were already in the working world. I mean, I know you have skills in graphic design, photography, video production. Maybe back then it wasn't quite video production at that time, but I remember meeting you, and tell us a little about that story. So you were in Tyler, and then you said, "Hey, I love tennis," and you came over and took some classes at the program we called Tennis Tech. 82, 84, I think.
Yeah, right in that time span. And like I said, out of juniors, there was, when I was 19, I actually had stress fractures so bad in my ankles that they had told me that my ankle could probably snap. And I think this is my message to a lot of people: buy good shoes. Don't wear bad shoes. Your shoes wear out, get new shoes, because I think I tried to extend the shoe life of my shoes. And you probably remember shoe goo and all those kind of things, Steve. But
yeah,
I got to say, I think I wore through the soles of my shoes so much, but it also affected my ankles. And so there was a point where it freaked me out so bad. I've just got to not play, as much. And so when I went to college, I actually quit playing. It wasn't because of burnout or anything. I was just kind of fearful of something like that, snapping an ankle. So, studied graphic design and art. And one summer I got a job in a summer job, kind of summer intern job. It started off at a chain of grocery stores there in Tyler called Brookshire's.
Brad Brookshire. I tell you a story about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so worked there and got to thinking I might want to try to play tennis again. It had been like 3-4 years since I'd really played competitively. And so I felt like, well, maybe I'd start hitting and maybe I'd think about playing again. So somehow somebody told me about this this thing called Tennis Tech. And they said, well, the kind of cool thing about it is they said they feed balls like a couple of nights a week. They do these drills, and these guys will feed balls, and it's free. And I wasn't looking for information then. I just felt like, well, it's a good opportunity to just have somebody feed balls. I really didn't know, too many people to play with at that point because I was pretty new to Tyler. And that's kind of how I got over there.
Well, it wasn't too far away from the junior college that there was a barber college, and you could go, and it didn't cost very much to get your hair cut. At Tyler Junior College, they had a program for dental hygienists, and actually that's Eugene Scott. He was the president of the board of trustees, and I was knocking balls around with him, and he knew my background. And by the time I was 26, I had been trained by Braden, Vandermeer, and Van Horn, and he's the one who put all that together. Or, like, how did that happen? But Brad Brookshire was a tennis player. I think many members of the family played tennis. You probably would know better than me.
Yeah, they did. Yep.
But I was out at Dave Anderson's place with a group of like 25 kids from South Africa, and we were given a tour of the new SMU tennis facility, which is amazing. But I understand that the Brookshire family, the success they've had with the grocery business, that they had a lot to do, or maybe the whole enchilada that they, as far as building that complex. But what comes to mind with Brad Brookshire, I mean, I think he was 4'5". There's a group of men in Tyler, Texas, and Tylee's name comes up anytime we talk about Tennis Tech because he was there for so long and helped so much. And Craig Tylee, our listeners know that he obviously is known for being the director of Tennis Australia. So we took a group of men, and Tylee, he certainly was like the kids I was teaching, trying to replicate the skill set that I had. But he certainly ended up having his own skill set because he got a master's in kinesiology. And what we did with that group of Brad Brookshire's teammates, they were getting ready to go to I think it was 4 or 5 nationals. It might have been 4-0 nationals, and they wanted us to work with them. And I remember Tylee, I bought the equipment, and we did body fat, and these guys were training with us, and they all got really fit, and they were dropping the pounds. But when they went to nationals, 3 of them got booted off the court for not being like they're sandbaggers, the term in golf where you lie your handicap. So I guess they either look like 5-0s in a 4-5 tournament, or they look like 4-5s in a 4-0 tournament. But that comes to my mind with. But yeah, no, I remember you making. We used to have these banners, so we had 9 months for the school year, and we would have 9 speakers. One was the PTR with Dennis Vandermeer every year, then it was the USPTA. But I remember you making one of those signs, like welcome Peter.
Yeah, I think I did. I think I did John Verdi. I think I did one for Vandermeer.
Yeah, Peter Burwash.
I think I did one for Vic. But as that went on, I started kind of, paying attention a little bit, and I ended up joining a club. I joined over at Timber Creek, and over at Tennis and Swim with Seema and Nicola over there.
Yeah, he was a great guy, Seema. I guess I keep interrupting you, but Seema, his brother was way up with the ITF. Maybe he was the president of the ITF. But I used to watch everybody teach tennis.
Yeah, he was Yugoslavian.
Yeah, with he was a great guy.
I think he played Davis Cup for Yugoslavia.
But I know I do a drill. I call it, I tell kids, can you flip a pancake? But you stand to the side of the court. And you feed the ball, you feed an overhead off the bounce. Kids need to learn to be able to do that self-fed overhead. But I remember Seema used to do it where he'd swing across the bottom of the ball, so then when the ball would bounce, it would go forward. And you think you got to watch people pick up all these little ideas. So the ball would hit the court, and of course you got to be able to do it the opposite way for a lefty. But if you're a righty to a righty, it's very easy to just take your hand underneath it. You slide it, and when the ball, you're hitting side spin, so when the ball bounces, it kicks forward. But anyway, that's a plug for the late Seema Nikolic.
Yeah, and that's kind of how a little bit of teaching, because SEMA, I'd be out there hitting. Another one of those guys on that team was Dan Tony, because I used to hit with him a bit, and it got to where SEMA would watch me hit and say some things, and so he needed somebody to feed balls, and I'd feed balls for him, and then I started learning more about the tennis tech, because I'd still go over there occasionally and kind of. I have to tell you, Steve, I kind of call myself a poacher. I kind of poached what you guys did, and it started making a lot more sense. And that's where I kind of ended up. Kind of thought, well, I might actually. I started thinking about at least doing tennis part time, teaching it, and with the possibility, well, maybe I could just flip careers instead of working in graphic design and art. Is maybe I could freelance that and do, tennis full time.
I missed. Why'd you call yourself a poacher? You mean stealing ideas?
Because
research.
I like some of the classes. I did a lot of those classes, kind of non-credit, and basically I was just getting information. I just want the information. I'd already gone to college, got the degree, and I didn't really care about the degree part. I just want content.
Yeah,
I just want content.
I used to recommend it. The term was you could audit. You just pay for the class, and the beauty of that is you didn't have to take the tests or write the term papers and all that. But
audit sounds like IRS. I think I like coaching better.
I'll agree with that. But Dan Tony, I got married in Ireland. Dan Tony and his wife Linda came to my wedding. But here's a Dan Tony story. The guy absolutely loved tennis, ears, nose, and throat. I told someone the other day is that I was talking to a physician, and this came up and that came up, and he was it was a father of a visiting player, but it wasn't he wasn't a physician, but excuse me, he was not a ears, nose, and throat. But you're never supposed to put anything, anything smaller than your elbow in your ear. You don't want to use Q-tips. But that's something for our listeners from Dan Tony. But I bought this apparatus, and it should still have it. But I remember Dan Tony, he came to every weekend guest, or like a Jim Lehrer would come in every other year. And I remember Dr. Lehrer asking me for a volunteer, and I guess I wasn't a volunteer. Told me to pick somebody from the audience, and hey, Tony, get down here. And Tony had to go to the men's room, take his shirt off, and had to put on, it was basically a heart rate monitor. And then Lehrer had on his wristwatch. He's into lecture, and he just out of the blue said, and now we'll have Dan Tony come down. Come on down, Dan. And he's caught him by surprise. He's obviously an hour into it. He's really into the lecture, and Tony is Jenkins 115. He has to come down, from the, like wherever he was sitting. So he comes down a flight of stairs in the lecture class, auditorium style, and then Lehrer goes into how much his heart rate jumped up. And we used to have players play with that. It's just amazing how nervous kids get. But that's something that's gone away. I mean, we should go back, and I would think now, I'm sure people can do that with their wristwatch. But yeah, Dan Tony.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, and I actually even poached some of your students for roommates, because at the time I was a single guy and I had an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, and I thought I could save some money by kind of subletting part of my apartment, and that's why I kind of met Philip Lowley and Daryl Northcott and some of those guys. I really enjoyed those guys too, because they were so into it, and that's all. Like Philip in particular, that's all we talked about is tennis, and we went out and started working on strokes. I got away from that continental grip as best I could, out hitting with him, and I owe quite a bit of court time to Philip and Daryl.
When I first started, I was at the Vic Braden Tennis College and went to Tyler, Texas. I didn't have a car. walking across campus carrying my groceries. I got students who have cars. There weren't that, as you know, back when we first started, there weren't that many students. But to write a sitcom, there was one time 6 students. Mike Rogers, I hear from all the time. There's Rennie Troxer, Tom Catone. I have to come up with these names. Bob Wiley, he would have been the star. It would have been better than a TV show like Welcome Back, Kotter. I mean, these guys, and when I first started, I was told the attendance policy, they recommended, the administrators, if you're absent 6 times, you get dropped from the class. If you're tardy twice, it's equal to one absence. So I came from California, and not perhaps, I didn't know the difference between being a liberal or conservative at that time. But I say, no, I'm not going to take attendance. I didn't start taking attendance, and Vandermeer shows up, and people are sleeping in. At that time, I was thinking, my ego wasn't too big. It's like I could see where they're not coming to listen to me, but we got Vandermeer here, and I had But I bought a little pickup truck. First one was brown, and the kids called it the toilet. I shouldn't say kids. I was a kid too, but. So then I brought a brand new white little pickup, and they called that toilet too. But I can remember leaving the courts, and I go, I'll be right back. And I would drive a few blocks, a small city like that, Tyler, Texas, and I would go. There were 6 guys in one house, and they all 6 of them maybe had a few beers, too many beers the night before. It's really interesting to think back that 81, 91 to work with all these college kids. But it could have been a sitcom. They had a tennis tree, and every time they had a tree in the front of the place they rented, and every time they wore out a pair of shoes, and they had this place for 2 years, they would tie the beat up throwaway shoes to the tree, and you just drive out. It was just so but that would have been a sitcom. Of course, then I was, there was in that program. There was kids between the ages of 18 and 23 that really couldn't tell you what they did for, they kind of bounced around from this curriculum or this degree plan, and then they saw, they thought that we were underwater basket weaving. So what I did is I'm going to make this program so tough, because the perception was it was going to be so easy. But let's go. Go ahead.
That's where I could go with the Vic thing, though. Is just that. So, I'd spoken about him earlier, is watch him on television and all. Well, that's where I met Vic. You had him come. I know I went like probably 2 times to it. I actually collect ticket stubs. I think I still have the stubs from you'd actually put, print tickets out for it.
Yeah, you showed that to me. I was so impressed with that.
Yeah. And so, and that's where I first met Vic, and I already had his book, because, like I said, watch him on television and stuff. But that was kind of like the whole Rod Laver thing. I was like, man, I can't believe the guy. I would hear his voice on television. Occasionally, you'd see little shots of him, but and you got pictures of him in a book, and there he is. And same thing with Vandermeer was really great. I did that whole thing with him. I took the Tennis University, the PTR test. His wife gave me the test, and Pat
Vandermeer,
you had to, and she pulled a quick one on me where I had to demo the serve left-handed, which at that time it pretty well freaked me out. Can I serve left-handed? And I got through that, but I really hats off and thank you for bringing those people to that small little town. I mean, these unbelievable names of tennis, and you got them there,
With more than welcome with Uncle Vic. It certainly wasn't you then, because there was a banner made, and it said, "Welcome, Dick Braden." And I go, no,
that wasn't me.
That wasn't you.
No, that would not be me.
That wouldn't have been you. But for our listeners, I used to tease, and we used to call Tennis Tech Resume Tech, because we would help students with a resume. Now you, and we're going to talk a little bit about your better half, the virtual resumes you have, and I know that ties in with your background, not only as the graphic designer, but Vic tells people to document everything. Tell us a little bit. Then in '94, you had one of the first tennis websites, but why don't you tell us a little bit about that
I'll tell you a little bit
just
how I
a
went
virtual
through
the
it.
resume and documenting
Yeah.
photos. It's amazing. It's just you look at it and it's like so much history to what you and your wife have both done in tennis.
Yeah. Well, I think probably it's because I'm a bit of a hoarder. I think I think that like I said, going back to the Beatle posters and all again, it's just that there's certain points in your life that you kind of preserve in some way, and I mean, there's people who write, being that I'm a graphic guy, visuals are really key to me. I'm kind of, we go into learning style, but I'm a visual learner for sure. And, which is, there's pluses and minuses to that, but, I kind of documented pretty much everything through my life, all these little stories and these little pieces of things. I do have a photograph here and there, and it's kind of a great memory book that on a career path, it's been a kind of a nice thing at a lot of the positions I've applied for, is to be able to actually give them something visual instead of just something written. Working with Vic, how that came about was, and like I said, I owe, you're one of my mentors, and I owe a lot to you, because you and Vic are the ones that have really, you made my career. And Vic in particular, how I came to work for him is that, out at Tyler Tennis Tech and all, my first job was, when I decided to flip careers, I actually went to Marshall, Texas, and there's like a little place called Cypress Valley, and it had I think 8 courts, and ran a little thing there, and then saw an opportunity to move to Colorado, and I moved to Denver, Colorado, and was teaching at a club. It was called Racket World at the time. Now it's called Athletic Club Monaco. But I spent about 3 years teaching, and then I had a men's 4-5 team. It was that I was coaching, and that team actually, I got them to go to the Nationals. But there was one player on the team, was a guy named Troy Davis, and there was another guy named Chip Clark. Chip Clark, his father-in-law was Dennis Ralston. Troy Davis, his stepdad was Vic Braden.
Yeah,
so
no Troy.
Troy would see me teaching lessons. We'd be on the court. I would run drills with him. And at one point, and this is pretty quick on, he said, "Well, where did you learn all this?" And I said, "Well, Vic Braden, got his book." I said, "And Tennis Tech, And so Troy didn't really tell me for quite some time, who his stepdad was. And one day, just out of the blue, he says, "My stepdad's Vic Braden." And I go, "No way."
That's funny.
Like that.
Never heard this story.
I was stunned at that, And so he said, "Yeah," he says, "I'm thinking about moving back to California." And he said, "Would you ever want to come out and work out there with us?" And he said, "I really like your teaching." He says, "Just what we do." And so we had a pretty long talk about it. And I said, "Yeah, I'd consider it." So Troy moved back to Coto de Caza, out from Denver, and he was going to kind of be put in charge of running the tennis college. So, he had been out there for probably 6 months, and I was, I hadn't heard from him that much. I didn't really pursue it. I just kind of thought, it might have been one of those things that it was just kind of blowing air at me type thing. And so, I got a call one day. My front desk came down, and it's a pretty busy tennis club, but I was out on the court in the middle of a lesson, and the front desk came down, and they said, "Steve, you got a call from a Mr. Vic Braden." And I told the lesson, I said, "I hate to do this. I would never do this, but can I go take that call?" And so I left the court, went up, and got on the phone. And the first thing is here's his jovial voice. And he goes, "Hey, Steve, this is Vic Braden." And I said, "Hi," and he said, "Troy's told me a lot about you." And he said, "Would you be interested in coming out to California and helping me with my graphic stuff because he had a video edit bay at the time. And it was pretty elaborate, but he said, would you want to come out here and be my graphic designer and be my head pro at the tennis college? And I literally, it was this fast. I said, yes, when?
That's funny.
And there wasn't a discussion of money or anything like that. I was just, that's the guy I wanted to be with, and he reached out, kind of to me, and I didn't really apply or anything, but my hat goes off to Troy for, having a belief in me too. And, when we were good friends but also just kind of like something about me, and he thought it'd be a good fit. So I asked Vic, I said, well, when do you want me out there? And he said, well, how's next month? I go, I'll be there. And that's literally how fast that happened. And so when I got out to Kodo, Vic, unbelievable guy. We never talked about money. I didn't say, what's my percentage? He didn't say, this is what you'll make or anything. I didn't care. Personally, I didn't care. And Vic had already paid my first 3 months rent of a house that's there on the golf course and had me all set up. And so, when I went out there, I actually taught most of the privates. I wasn't one of the coaches doing it, but I did all the privates, worked the junior group, and ran some of the program for the country club there. So back out there, they said, well, do you know any other pros? That we need another pro. And that's where I said, well, yeah, I got somebody in mind. And I said, Philip Lely, my little practice partner from Tyler, who I hadn't seen in a while either. But Philip by that time was back in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I called Philip and I said, Philip, do you want to come out here work with Vic? And it was like me too. He goes, sure, I'll be there. And that's how we all got together. Yeah.
One time Vic had, even in Marbella, Spain, but he had a place in Switzerland. He had, I could just go through Ancam, Goslar, Reidenwinkel. He had a number of schools in Germany. And I think I'm going to guess it was 84, but after 84, every head coach he trained, every head coach he hired, I had trained, with the exception of Luke Wickham, who came into Orlando, and then he ended up spending a ton of time with us. There's a fun story where Vic shows up at a place and he's doing a traveling clinic, and he's meeting with the coaches, and they're gonna help him run a traveling tennis college, and he's a one-man band. He shows up by himself. I did so many things where I traveled with Vic, but that time he was, flying solo, and he asked, he goes, has anybody here read any of my books? And people, yeah, I have looked at your books. I say, have you read any of my books? Open to page 1, page 2, and it was Nick DeVoe, and he was also from Colorado. He went to Tennis Tech, and he said, well, yeah, I went to Tennis Tech, and he said, okay, you'll be my head coach. And I guess the story goes, he had only been on staff for a few weeks. So he shows up, and the head coach is there, and the leaders of the quite a large staff. And Vic said, okay, I'll run the classroom and you run the courts. And he goes, this is what we'll do. And that, because he just knew that you guys would know the peel off drill and the circle drill, and you just would. Because what we did is we lived Vic Braden. We had a lab for our listeners, and other teachers as well. I mean, people hear it over and over again that Braden was the Christmas tree, and everyone else was an ornament. I wanted to ask you, while we're on Braden, about Andy Fitzell, how old he was when you met him. I talked to Dave Secker today. He said, I heard he's at a pro tournament with Andy in Mexico, and Dave's one of the coaches at NC State, the women's team, and he started telling that he heard the funniest thing about hitting the ball flat, and Andy said, well, if it's at sea level and you hit 212 miles an hour, you have to have hair on your tongue and live in a tree.
Yeah.
But so as he started saying that, I mean, if people like yourself worked with Vic, you can finish the sentences. I mean, I do. Yeah. I know there's a lot of people who embellish their backgrounds. It's like for years and years here in Florida, I can't tell you how many people have told me they worked for Harry Hammond and they didn't work for Harry Hammond. No. But how Andy started our podcast.
Andy was 14 years old. So what was is he. I kind of remember that he came out there with his mother to the college, and they were looking at doing some lessons, and so I think money was a little bit of an issue, and so at that time, you know, I could tell he was into it, and so I did a few lessons with him, and Vic and I was telling him, I said, well, this Andy kid, you know, he's really into it, and we should help him along. And so we came up with the idea, let's have him kind of work around the Kodo there. He can pick up balls. We can teach him how to string. And that's kind of how that little piece got going. But, Andy, when I said this at the beginning, there's all the friendships I've met. You know, here I talk about, Philip. I meet him at Tyler. Then we go out of contact with each other. But then he's the first one I think about coming to California. He goes out there. Andy, as a 14-year-old, ends up, coming out there. I ended up leaving. Then, I don't know, 20 plus years later, Andy and I worked together in Hawaii. I reached out to him, and he ended up becoming, pretty much Vic's right-hand man.
I always say, other than wife Vic's widow Melody, in the last 10 years, no one spent more time with Vic Braden than Andy.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And
coming back to
Vic,
go ahead.
I got one other little deal with Vic, and this is something I think it just was absolutely invaluable to my tennis knowledge, is that being a graphic designer and his interest in me working in his video edit bay is that, I teach tennis during the day, and then at night, that's when Vic kind of started working on his research and his videotapes. And so he had this literally edit bay with probably $1 million plus of video equipment and all. And, so it was kind of like his little kind of man cave, I'd say. So he would go in there and work on videotapes, and he had an editor there, but I would be in there too, working on the little video workstation there where you do the layout topography and do some animation. And so it was great because I distinctly remember he had shot a lot of footage of Stefan Edberg, and he would be commenting on it as he's going just to himself. And he would lean over to Steve, you got to look at this. And it was just, I was just hanging out with him, here I am poaching again, and it is so great to sit in there and just watch him work through the way he was going to present something. And on Wednesday night, that's the one night that we wouldn't be in the edit bay, is that he'd do a free clinics for the membership, and that's Vic giving back. And it was just uncanny to me that, people come to the tennis college there, and they're paying all day, but Vic gives back to the community by doing these free clinics every Wednesday night. And so, and I'd help him with those. He would say, well, he said, Steve, what did we do last week? I said, well, Vic, I think we did volleys. He said, well, why don't we do backhands tonight, or backhands, I should say. And I said, yeah, that's great, but that was, I always thought that was something really, really nice about him. And then the clinic was supposed to last an hour, and we're there an hour and a half and even 2 hours. And the ones that are still left around, we'd be down to maybe 5 players. He would invite them over to his house afterwards. So it's great guy, man.
Well, let me throw 3 things in there with for our tennis teaching pros who listen to this. It's great if you could give a free clinic. And, certainly people say, well, there's no such thing as a free clinic because you're using it as a promotional tool. But what we did years later, I would like to think that we're, still giving a free clinic because we do all this free content, courses online and Instagram posts and Facebook and this and that. But we started calling our free clinic the $1 Clinic, and we actually got more people to come out just because it had a catch to it. People started talking about it more. The $1 Clinic, it just costs $1. But let me say this about going back to Dave Secker. He told me, he obviously thinks the world of Andy Fitzell, and he said that with Vic's book that came out that you mentioned in '77, there's been others. And I know Tennis for the Future was updated as Tennis 2000. And the listeners, you can still find copies. But Dave Secker was saying they just need to change the title, past, present, and future, and not change anything but the photos. With your background as a graphic designer, what we need to do, Mike McLaughlin, and I should have done this. I'm a total amateur. I mean, talking to Andy Fitzell and his beautiful wife Leo, he started the podcast. I mean, I was kind of the talking head because of our pillars. I'm the one who spent so much time, or Andy didn't directly spend time with our other 7 pillars, but Andy Fitzell is a Vic Braden outlier. Not only, let me say that Mike McLaughlin and Mike Valentine, they're going to, and I should have said this in the beginning of the podcast, that you're the director of this beautiful resort, Wintergreen, Virginia. But they're coming to visit, and we, a few years ago, I met with the CEO of the USPTA, and I met with people at Lake Nona, the USTA people, and said, hey, we should have an annual Vic Braden clinic. And it's just amazing. He was so misinterpreted. And I know the Tennis Channel, certainly has the film portion of his library, but, McLaughlin, who was on as a guest on our podcast, and again, you don't look like you're in your 60s, but you're in your 60s, and there's it's like Jimmy Connors said about Elvis Presley, there's only a few of us left. There's only a few people, or this very small group of people. I mean, I know there's people that really study the books and study the tapes, but I think there's not that large a group of people who are really, they just had spent so much time with Vic, and there just should be something to carry the torch. We're trying to do that. I know Paul McDonald, he thinks that, and this is patting myself on the back, but he's the one who says it, that no one really else is doing it like we're doing it with the GreatBase as far as getting Vic Braden information out.
I know you had Gideon, and I tell you that he's the nuts and bolts of a lot of that, and that's I don't know of any better bit of information, sports science wise, about tennis than what came from Vic and Gideon. I like being able to quantify things, and they certainly did it. And I just, like I said, I just use their information, but I 100% believe it, and there's proof in it. So
I think what you said about you weren't interested in what you're going to be paid. I know when I worked for Vic, I took this job at Tyler Junior College, and Dean Mentor, he said, well, do you want to know what you're going to be paid? I go, oh, yeah, tell me. And I wasn't interested. I just was like, this is the job I want. And even when I was there, there was a gentleman who built, it's called Holly Tree. He built a country club. And I felt like I was talking to someone who was from the TV show Dallas, and he's an oil tycoon. And he goes, you're going to come work for me. And he, it's public domain. He goes, I know what you make. You're going to come work for me. And I go, no, I'm not going to leave this position to go to a country club. Nothing against a country club, but to have so much learning taking place on that campus. But when I worked initially for Braden, they forced me to work for him. Mary Lay, she was in charge. She was the head coach, and I found out years later that basically people should have listened to Mary first. So because Vic would sometimes go so fast, is that people couldn't really follow him. A great communicator, but to really study Vic, you should have read his books, and you got to hang out and listen and listen and listen. But I think finally the summer season came around, because what I was doing is I was working nights. I was living in my van working nights, so I was a gopher. I'd show up and I'm getting aerial and all these world-class athletes, and it was great. And so when Gideon was on the podcast, I had one book. He sent me another book, and people need to listen to that. And just you can see movement, but you can't see forces, and you can't see the wind, but go stand in it. And people just it's physics. It's all this rant and raving about junior tennis. People just need to have unbelievable skills. I liked what Casey Curtis said. He was a guest on our podcast. Skills. He just said it 3 times. But going back to Andy, he not only ended up in Southern Cal, but he lived where Vic ended up having a school in Utah. So then there was
St. George.
you're from a different era, I think, a little bit. Mark Jakes and Dave Nostrand were younger than you, than after than you. But did you cross paths with those guys?
Yeah. Dave. Moving on in my life, I ended up moving to Hawaii. So I was fortunate, spend 9 years in Hawaii, and like I said, it's kind of fun business. I actually remember, Steve, you had everybody in one of those classes. You said, write down your goals. I mean, you still love journals and people. You said, everybody, I want you to write down your goals when you're, what you'd like to do, in the next 5 years or so. And one of the goals I actually did write down is that I just wanted to run a very successful junior program at a big club, a club that has, all the surfaces. I was thinking, where you had grass and hard court and clay. And the irony is I've probably done that about 4 times now. And, I've been at some unbelievable properties, and I've worked for, member-owned clubs to corporate-owned clubs to, privately, just an individual. I've worked public facilities. So I've been fortunate to kind of do the whole thing. But Hawaii was a really good experience. And so we spent 7 years on the Big Island and 2 years in Maui. But when I got there, in a resort setting, what better person to bring in than to try to bring in Vic? So I reached out to Dave Nordstrom and see if at the time it was, I think, what do they call it, Court Think.
Yeah.
They had a deal, Court Think, and I said, would you guys be interested in running the Fairmont Orchid there on the Big Island with me? Because I had already was running another property, which was the Hawaii Preparatory Academy. It was an international boarding school there on the Big Island. And part of that is, can we get Vic out a couple of times a year? And, I reached out to him, and he's so close with Dave and Andy, Vic was all in. And so for about a year, we had the Vic Braden Tennis College there at Fairmont Orchid on the Big Island. And so then once again, Andy and I, here's this full circle thing. It's like, I think going back to Joseph Campbell always talked about the hero's journey. You make this big circle. Well, I've circled back to the people that I think they're really solid in my life multiple times. And I think, Steve, the GreatBase it is a circle too. I tell students that, I said, well, man, you're learning this, you're in the circle, and I said, there's a circle of coaches and influence. And I said, it's a good circle to be in. It's a really good one because we're trying to expand it, but it's really nice to have it where, it's kind of a system that everybody kind of knows. And I wouldn't say even system, but it's like you got a guy, everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
And pros that I've hired over time, that's always been a real key thing for me is people that, we're on the same page teaching or relatively close. And
well, storytelling, obviously this podcast is that's what it is. It's a series of stories. Here's something on photography. And again, with your wife as well, those virtual resumes. It's maybe that's not the best way to say it.
It's a visual. I call it visual.
Yeah, no, it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime story. You and your wife had a lifetime in tennis. I heard someplace way back when is that no, I'm not going to take photos because I'll be back. And I've certainly been to a lot of places that I've been back to, but it's like that was dumb. But here's something that I still to this day, and actually anybody who's been around me with my telephone skills, I've never taken a photo with my phone. Because I hate cell phones, because I know they just they're the monster, they're the dream killer, they're the worst thing for junior tennis is the telephone. And I mean, for the longest time I wasn't going to get one, but Melody and Vic, obviously the three of you, that's something that they were so keen on is photography.
Yeah. I did a little segue about my wife here. Like I said, the things like so a lot of these things that tennis has given me, but I also met my wife through tennis. And Yeah.
Let me rattle this off. Did a little homework, just on the a
Colleen.
visual journey. But former Colleen Patton. I mean, we got to get Greg on our podcast. What a character! Former USTA national coach, former college coach, college tennis Hall of Fame. But tell me the story. Didn't their father passed away at a very young age, and Greg was like the oldest of 7 or something, right?
Yeah, that's true. So Greg kind of became the father of all of them. And so Colleen, my wife Colleen, she was, I think she's about second youngest out of all the siblings there, but they all played tennis. Greg's and my father-in-law, which he played tennis till he was 91. My mother-in-law, or which Colleen and Greg's mother, played tennis till she was 89.
And she taught both. It wasn't just Greg. The mom taught your wife as well.
Yeah, she taught.
Grew up in Santa Barbara.
And she, her name's Rita, and Rita was actually, she's the oldest woman in U.S. history to play college tennis. She went back to college at the age of 64 and made the team at Santa Barbara City College. And so they did a little write-up on her, and I think in Sports Illustrated, they always had those little articles in the back page of Sports Illustrated, and I think there's a whole thing about Rita on that and that. But Colleen and I actually, as coaches, I've done all kinds of coaching with zonals and the boys 18s, Junior Davis Cup, all that kind of stuff. But Colleen and I actually met at a 14 zonals in Omaha, Nebraska. Not that we were players at 14 years old in the zonals, but we were coaches that were there
for different sections, right?
Yeah, and it's I always feel like it's just an amazing journey because I've met so many people through tennis, and I continue, but they're just wonderful people, and we've had Colleen and I, we worked together here at Wintergreen where I'm now in Virginia, but we've always enjoyed working together. I actually told people, I said, the reason I married her is because I like being with her. But a big part of this whole thing is people say, well, when are you guys going to retire? And don't you get tired of your job? It's not a job. This is just what we do, and this is our life, and that's, I don't see a retirement there. Retirement means I'm not able to walk around anymore. But I think for this, it's just been an exceptional journey.
It was great to talk to Jacob Hansen about Peter Burwash. It's great if you can do something you love. I mean, obviously, there's always a downside to any job. I don't even like the word job. I'll tell young people I've trained, call it a project. This is the project I'm on. I'm building this. I'm helping this kid build their forehand. This kid said they want to be a good tennis player. It's a project. It's not a job. Colleen, California kid. I mean, she won a high school doubles 4 years in a row. Actually, Vic Braden, he was an athlete, little short guy. I mean, he was a high school quarterback, basketball player. I think it was 3 times where he won the singles championship in Michigan. But your wife played at UCI, University of California, Irvine.
Yep.
That's where I met her brother way back when.
Greg, when he was coaching there.
Yeah, a kid named Ruben Perchek who played for him, who I met through Kim Wittenberg. Like you said, I like how you mentioned it's a circle. And Perchek, he ended up on the medical staff at Stanford, which makes me think when I say Stanford, looking at your wife's background, back in the day, I mean, I consider myself very proud to have been a tennis camp junkie. Your wife, obviously, is a very accomplished player. She played across the U.S., played in Europe, played in Asia, represented the U.S. I mean, lots of tournament wins. I've got down here. She was on the court with Austin, Davenport, the Bryan brothers as a competitor.
Yep.
Vijay Armitage, Gene Mayer.
Mm-hmm.
I may have already said this to repeat myself. Senior moment, played club tennis in Germany with. But really good players like that years ago would still teach in the summer. And you learn so much by teaching. You don't want to do too much of it, but also if you're really motivated and you say you've taught 6 hours at a camp, a 3-hour morning session, 3-hour afternoon session, and then, hey, I got to go practice. And, but you have down here that your wife worked at the Stanford camp a couple summers, and just that in itself is like, hey, let's talk about that. I mean, these podcasts could go forever. I mean, that would be great to talk to your wife. Just that one camp. I mean, because when you think of Stanford, you think of Dick Gould and 17 national championships and Frank Brennan and and the women's side. The women's side has continued. Was it
here's part of
I
that.
believe. Go ahead.
Yeah, part of that circle is that, like, when we were in Hawaii, I had the Stanford men's and women's team come over to the Big Island to play the University of Hawaii, and it's just, like I said, it's a lot of this is because I think people, they like being around tennis, they like being around good people. You got to trust. It's a really broad circle of friends, and that's what I would say to kids is just. And Greg kind of preaches this too. He said, every tournament, make a new friend. Every time, make a new friend. You can't have enough friends. And Vic, for me, was definitely a friend. And besides being a mentor, I mean, I literally spoke to him a week before he passed away. He's a friend,
No, it's great. I told a young guy today, with where he is with his tennis game, maybe he shouldn't go to beautiful Colorado and go skiing. But he said to me, I said, are you going with your family? He goes, no, I'm going with my best friend. I looked right at him. I said, wait a minute. I thought I was your best friend.
Yeah.
But I was taught by my mother a long time ago, and I think everybody should know this is not what my mother taught me necessarily, but just this tip is never say best friend, because you should have so many best friends. And if you have a best friend, what's the second person going to think? But yeah, I have tons of friends. That expression, don't burn bridges. Yeah, so you really don't want to burn bridges. I think something else that counters that, though, in tennis is that we got to build bridges. And I think that's one thing that's a major problem is there's not a bridge for a beginner to become an advanced beginner. There's not a bridge for, okay, you're training at this club or this park and your parents move. There's not a bridge from that coach to the next coach. And you need to. I understand. People say, you don't want to burn bridges, but at the same time, we have to build bridges. And I don't think in the world of tennis, the best way to build bridges is through education. And the people should be linked together. I don't have that many original thoughts. I mean, that's where. And again, the people who are listening to our podcast, thank you. But again, I say the same thing. It makes no sense for everybody to add their own 2 cents. And what Braden put together, people say, well, it's not relevant today. I was very flattered that Vic said, Steve, we should have been working together, and I should have gone forward with a flashlight. That in the end, that's what I said. He said we should have worked together. I'm the one who said, yeah, you should have gone forward with a flashlight, making all these new discoveries. And I went backwards and hit people over the head with a club. And, you do need a good cop, bad cop. I mean, Vic, but people really listen to Vic. They would misinterpret him because he was always, like you said, jovial. He used to always say it's not a golden day. And, he had comments like, shut up and show me how to hit it. Just shut up and show me how to hit it. He had his pet peeves where, he wouldn't want to have kids going across the baseline hitting forehands for 20 minutes at the beginning of a lesson, or just going across the baseline for 2 minutes. But he also, the pet peeve, he never wanted someone to say, well, in the next class, this is what we're going to cover. Vic used to say you need to teach bell to bell. And, I had some people working for me when I was a department head, and I used to have a student assistant go to the class and make sure that, certainly it was one of the tennis coaches, and their thing was they wanted to have a winning tennis team. And you can be really popular if you let your students out 20 minutes early, 30 minutes early, 50-minute class, seriously. Yeah, we're done for the day. But Vic used to say, just teach bell to bell. But yeah, with your wife, almost 30 years, diversified experience. But yeah, it's always good to cover the better half.
Too. I was thinking Vic always, like, as he I don't like the word tennis pro. I don't think it's a tennis pro, but I like coach. He always call us coach. Like Vic would, I'd walk up and he'd say, "What are we going to do today, coach?" That's a different word than calling somebody a pro. But also I think the skill sets and all to be a coach involves many more things than somebody's just a ball feeder.
Here's a clever Bradenism, a trick of Vic, is that if he saw somebody that he didn't know, he'd go right up to him and say, "Hey, Phantom, where have you been? You've been a ghost. I haven't seen you in a long time." But he knew that and I learned this from Vandermeer, that I could learn 50 names in 5 minutes, and I can remember one time, he did it many, many times. We'd be in some gathering or some traveling clinic. He said, "Steve, why don't you introduce everybody now?" And I would, I don't know what it was, NHL hockey playoffs. Somebody cornered me and I didn't learn everybody's name. But that was when I traveled with Vic. That was something that I would do. Is I would go in the room. It's very easy if it's wine and cheese and people are having a beer or whatever. You just go by and you just shake everybody's hand, and all you got to do is have the confidence to do it. Repeat the names, use the names over and over again. But he used to do that. "Hey, Phantom, how you doing?" And but go right up to him. It is a little bit awkward socially to have forgot somebody's name. When an adult says they're not very good, "I'm not very good with names," that's just something they've done their whole life. And when you meet somebody, well, you need to shake their hand, and we got to repeat their name at least 3 times. "Hi, Jim. How you doing, Jim? Where are you from, Jim?" And just got to repeat it over and over again. With tell us a little bit about Wintergreen.
Wintergreen, yeah. So I think Wintergreen. I talked to her earlier about being from Hawaii. I actually haven't seen all the United States, so we have not been to the East Coast. But I think we got a gem of a spot here, and up on a mountaintop. It's about 3,500 feet up, cooler than being in Southern Cal or Florida, which is nice. The average temperature, as somebody that's been outside a lot during my whole career, is like, the average temperature during the summer is probably around 75 degrees. Clay courts, indoor courts, kind of those little packages I said of what my goal was, is to have a facility that kind of has all the tools that are available. Indoor courts. We've got 3 indoor courts here, but it's all set in a beautiful woodsy area, kind of near the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Appalachian Trail. And it is just an unbelievable place. And I talked earlier about how many places we've been and worked for and all, but Vic was even going to write a book once called "Wish to Woulda Coulda." How many people go through life where they go, "Well, I wish I would have done this," or "I could have done this." And I kind of like the exploration of it. And tennis is tennis, but I can teach it in different settings. And this is really a nice setting here in Virginia. And for you, the guys that are listening to this, Steve, you can kind of give a little intro into it, but we're going to try to do something this summer here in beautiful Wintergreen, Virginia. And it's a really unique setting, but it's also, I think, a setting that's real conducive to learning and having fun learning. It kind of makes you think how Vic always talked about laugh and win. I mean, it's you can get better and laugh and smile and relax, and improve. It doesn't have to go without some enjoyment. Enjoy the experience of learning. And I think sometimes the environment that we create, not just by us as coaches, but even the setting kind of helps that too. It's not a hysterical environment.
No, I went up there to visit with you and Colleen and see Wintergreen. Beautiful, beautiful place. Not that easy to get to though, remote, and I think that's obviously a plus. Tell us about how you get there, where you fly into, and what cities are in close proximity.
Yeah, Washington, D.C. is about 3 hours away. There's what's that Dulles Airport there. You fly into Richmond or Charlottesville, should I say. Charlottesville is about 45 minutes away. It's not too far away from North Carolina. The Virginia Beach is 3 hours away. But like I said, the setting set in the hills. There's not a lot of stop signs and stuff, which is a lot of traffic and, no fast food, which is, I would put that in the plus column for athletes.
There's no Chipotle. I don't know if some of the junior players I work with could survive.
Yeah, Chipotle is pretty solid. And then too, it's actually there's golf here. It's 2 locations. We have 4 courts in a valley, and then up on the mountain there's 4 clay courts, and then up in the mountain there's the 12 clay courts, and there's the 3 indoor hard courts, and then there's also pickleball. That's fascinating thing for all of you guys that think that pickleball is not here to stay. I'd say it probably is.
So let me interrupt. We'll come back to pickleball. I don't want
to
be rude, but let's come back to pickleball. I got some notes here, but let's go back to Wintergreen a little bit. Snow. That's the number one deal up there, right? Is that people go there to ski, right? I know you have beautiful golf, all these amenities, weight room, indoor pool, outdoor pool. Obviously, if someone wants to go on a hike, it's the place to go. It's right up there with it's like a beautiful place. Go ahead.
Exactly. There's 30 miles of hiking trails. The ski, they have night skiing, and then there's daytime skiing. There's a tubing park. There's a really nice spa, indoor outdoor pool. But it's a really unique setting. When they hired me here, the CEO of the company, during the interview, he said it's such a unique place. He says, I think you need to go see it to experience it. And it's, like I said, I've been a lot of places across the United States and a lot of clubs, but this is certainly unique, and I'd put it pretty top shelf type club here.
I would say I did it for 10 years. It's interesting. You look back, and again, that's the great thing about how you and your wife had the resumes. You look back and see the photos. But your place would be I think it'd be a great place in the Christmas, New Year's, the semester break, however you label it, to have a coach's class, a coach's course, and then families could come and then their kids could go snow skiing. Because the tennis is not as busy as in the wintertime as the snow skiing, correct?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. We've been here nearly a year and a half. That the golf here is seasonal. The skiing seasonal, but the tennis, we have tennis year round because we go from either the clay courts to the indoor. A lot of times, with people ski half a day and then they'll come into the tennis courts, the other half, or in the evenings. They get the benefit of the morning skiing, and then they use the tennis center in the afternoons.
What about
it's 7 days a week?
What about
7 days a week?
Yeah, that makes sense. Now you say about the indoor courts, but they have to make their own snow most of the time.
Yeah, they have actually a couple of the most sophisticated snowmaking machines in the world, and the ownership of the property, they're based out of Utah. They actually own about 5 other ski resorts, but they literally could control the machines from Utah. I've learned a lot about snowmaking here too. Like I said, being in tennis, you always where it's sun and shine, but it takes about 10 inches of water to make 1 inch of snow.
Say that again.
But
say that again.
10 inches of water to make 1 inch of snow.
Wow.
So these mountains, there's a lot of water and springs underneath. And so, there's lots of rivers. It's being that there's a lot of water here, it's also very green. And hence the name, probably wintergreen. It's
For our Canadian listeners, I ask Canadian juniors who have tons of Canadians come and visit. Do you know why you're not supposed to eat yellow snow? And they all look at me and smile. They do get that. But then my next question is, could you walk from here and put your hand on the net? They struggle. It's amazing how tennis players don't know where the net is. They hit balls into it, but they don't know how to walk towards it. How about mountain biking?
There's a lot of mountain biking on the trails around the Appalachian Trail. There's a lot of that up there. Like I said, Appalachian Trail, I'd probably get the number wrong, but it stretches along the whole eastern seaboard from, what's that, probably Maine or so. That'd be right, Steve, down to Georgia. I know it goes all the way down to Georgia, and that's probably one of the longest hikes in the United States, but also one of the most beautiful.
I have a couple of friends that have done that from one end to the other. With mountain biking, obviously at the resort, they have bikes that you can rent, correct?
They go down in the valley, not on the mountain per se. But let's say another thing that I think is really unique too is just the amount of wildlife is up here too. I mean, there's bears, hawks, eagles. There's a lot. This is a big area for bird watching. Like I said, the Blue Ridge Parkway is one of the most scenic drives in all of the United States. I mean, it kind of hangs on the edge of cliffs and kind of meanders through really nice forests. So it's literally 5 minutes from my tennis center, where we're at here. So it's really a beautiful place. We've got several restaurants up here. During the summer, they actually have a Wintergreen Music Festival. It's usually classical music. They do outdoor plays, some that runs pretty much all summer. They've had the Sound of Music up here, which is, you can imagine the sound of music in a mountain setting. Watching a play like that it's pretty exceptional.
I know that we'll come back and we'll talk about pickleball we'll come back and talk about spin-offs as well. In other words, I just mentioned that it'd be great to have a week in the semester break and say somewhere where it's after Christmas or before New Year's, like Vic used to have. He had his course for coaches. I used to go from I have a semester break off, being a department head at a college, and I would be at the Orange Bowl, and then I went 10 times to his. I went as a student, I worked it as a staff member, and I took coaches over and over again. But it would be great to have and I have so many of those on audio cassette. The USTA, the United States Tennis Academy, and that's something too that Vic stopped doing. And it's like, well, gee, why did that happen? The way life unfolds is that, it used to be capacity. He had a classroom that would sit 72 people, and he would take 72. Maybe he'd have it 80 and put some more chairs in. But yeah, this summer we're scheduled to come and join you for the summer. But it's really, I was on a conference call with you and team members, people who work there, and I think the one lady who said it's really more of a program than a camp. But we're scheduled to be there, I think June 17th, sometime in August. Not a 9 week. It's 9 weeks, correct?
Yeah. We're really looking forward to it. I also can tell you too. They call this Nelson County 151, and what that is this is kind of the heart of Virginia wine country, wine and cider country, and probably for the Australian guys, the beer too. But I think there's it'd probably be pretty close to right. There's probably 40 plus wineries and breweries all in this kind of county. So it's kind of but that's because it's just lush and it's a beautiful spot. So.
No, we're off to a late start getting the word out. But we have had a coach from Australia contact us, wants to come over and bring a group, and it's a long ways to come. But we certainly feel that it's just a solid connection for you and I, the way we go back. And I just have to tell people that we studied tennis together in the 80s, and most importantly, Steve worked for, you have obviously as a tennis director, you have to wear so many different hats, but But that's to me, the most important. The most important is, they asked me about Steve Campbell. Yeah, he doesn't own Campbell Soup, but he did work for Vic Braden.
Yeah. Well, I would offer Texas hospitality in a Virginia setting. So I would say,
I know you got a great sense of humor, so I'll bring in my Texas jokes out.
Yeah, that was a joke.
No. I think I love the Texans. Yeah. The Texans are like Bostonians. They just have great missionaries. They think Texas is the greatest place in the world. So I certainly.
Well, it is.
There you go. But with pickleball, I just think a story. When I first heard of Wintergreen, and I'd heard the name and such, but when I heard, Andy Fitzell, he was contacted by Warren Pretorius, who Tennis Analytics. He's been a guest on our podcast, and I like how you said the circle. Years ago, I had met Warren, but I was at a used PTA function, and I'm listening to Warren, and I went up afterwards and said, "Hey, you connected with Vic?" And he was very nice. I think he's an intellectual, but he's very humble. And he said, "No, I connected with Dave Nostrand and Mark Jakes, and then Andy Fitzell. With that group, he'd be the younger statesman." And I remember Warren, who's such a smart guy. He said, "Steve, you were smarter than I was." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You got it all at once. I would just hear Vic, golden nugget here and a golden nugget there." But, I've heard him say, because for the longest time, he traveled all over the world. It's escaping me, Dartfish. And he was a leader with Dartfish. And with that, he'd say, "Well, I go to these academies to sell Dartfish, but I really feel like telling kids, hey, put your rackets in your shoulder bag." That's where I got that line. I steal lines. Poached. I like that. I poached that from Warren Pretorius. Yeah. "Put your rackets in your shoulder bag and run away as fast as you can." And it's unfortunate, that's where we come across egotistical, but it's really unfortunate when you're watching kids, they got palm up serves and, they're running the wrong way. I know I have a lot of kids now that are talking about the Easter Bowl, and I said, "Did you say toilet bowl? I don't want to offend the Easter Bowl." I go off on a tangent with Cena Hamilton. I one time had the job of the project of trying to buy the Easter Bowl for Ravi Seguzo, Carleen Bassett, and Arthur Cohen. And I said, I think she's selling us a Super Bowl. But so anyway, Warren Pretorius tells Andy Fitzell about Wintergreen at that time. For personal reasons, more so than professional. He married a young German gal, a beautiful lady and beautiful person. And so they're going back to Germany. So then anyway, I did talk to the CEO, and at that time is where I said, "Hey, let's delay the pickleball story," because I remember telling a gentleman, the CEO, his first name's Vern. I remember telling him, because they had a problem, I think, with 3 courts or whatever with drainage, and they said that, they're looking at doing different things. And I said, "Well, you have 3 indoor courts. You build 3 more indoor courts." And he said, "I'll just come there, hook, line, and sinker, and make it a coaching school, and coaches will bring players." But, I had the conversation, and then I know shortly afterwards you were involved. But tell the listeners because I've been there, and it's amazing. It's really done. They didn't build a new. I think he told me that would have been $1 million, but you came in, you're instrumental with what they've done with pickleball, and it's great that at your place pickleball. I'm sure on a rainy day, I like the verb, they're invading tennis. But I'm sure on a rainy day, they're inside playing some pickleball. You got to, obviously, as a tennis director, schedule that. But tell us what you've done with the facility, the pickleball facility at your place.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd say, even for anyone, is just that, and this is something Vic actually said too, is that he always said the tennis court is like your office. And you got to treat a place like if it was your home or if it was your own. Like this is somebody else's property, granted that they own it, but I kind of feel like, well, if it was mine, how would I treat it? And I think part of it is a little bit of Boy Scout too, is that you leave a place better, when you left than when you got there. And so this place, we've done a lot of improvements, and there was actually 3 dead courts. Those ones that we were talking about, there were ones that had been kind of abandoned by, I think, several reasons: lack of use, and then also by just the drainage problem on a clay court. And so when I got here, somebody had told me that said, "Hey, well, there's probably a hard court underneath it." And so we dug down about a foot down. It looked like an archaeological dig where you're, looking for King Tut's tomb. And a foot down, we struck a hard court. And then the crew took about 20 dump loads or truckloads of clay off of these 3 courts and discovered that there was a hard court, 3 hard courts underneath.
Wow.
And then they were in pretty good shape. There's not too many cracks, so it missed either by compaction or how they were built. They were done pretty well. So, we were at this little point. Well, do we keep tennis courts? Keep 3 hard courts, or should we think about the pickleball, which is, like I said, it's kind of rampant in the United States now, and so I was looking at 3 hard courts versus 8 pickleball courts. And so we decided to kind of go with the pickleball, and the nice part about that too is it's in its own little setting. It's not like, I know some of the other clubs I've been at, pickleball is, it's gotten noisy, and there's a subset of people that don't like being next to it, but this has its own kind of unique setting. And it's first class. Here at Wintergreen, this work for a lot of companies, but they don't cut corners. And so it's first class there. But, we do juggle. I have members and people who play both. And matter of fact, I play. My wife, like I said, she has an extensive tennis playing background, but she's also a very, very good pickleball player, and she teaches pickleball too. And I think that transition for her to teach pickleball than to go from pickleball into tennis is a lot easier transition from someone that I think as the future goes, I think there's going to be people who just play pickleball. And I think that's going to be a hard transition if they ever wanted to coach or play tennis to go that route. I think the tennis to pickleball is a lot easier route, to make that transition. But most of it, I think what we found is that I think the difference, and I do like playing it a bit, but it's certainly a lot more social. It's easier for people that really, you just take a few steps and you're at the net. But being still kind of a tennis purist, I like tennis, but the part about pickleball I've discovered with one of our other pros here is Ethan, is that playing singles reminds me of the way I used to play as a junior tennis, because you got a lot more court to cover, and basically you got to serve. The ball comes back to you, let it bounce once, and then get to the net. If you're on the receiving side, you try to get to the net. So back to the full circle, Steve, is back like, get to the net. And, points are won from the net. In pickleball, in singles play in particular, you cannot win from the baseline. And I think that's kind of a fun part of it. That was a lot more instinctive for me. Like even Colleen and I, when we played pickleball, your first ball back after you serve, you're supposed to let it bounce. That was a tough deal because I was so used to going in, and playing doubles, you're so used to going in instead of letting it bounce that one time. But I see pluses in it now. I'm kind of looking at it a little bit differently. I've spent.
Yeah, I know you mentioned to me the
50 years in tennis. It's like, wow.
Yeah, you mentioned that you have it's like a second facility at the bottom of the mountain where you have 4 clay courts. At the top, you have 15 courts at the top plus pickleball. You said to try to make the clay courts down at the bottom really compact. I remember being at Boca West, All American Sports, and Jimmy Connors was playing Borg. Jimmy O'Brien was the tennis director, and they had somebody the entire night. They didn't stop. They had a couple guys take turns, and they rolled the court the entire night. And Borg still ended up winning that match. But Jimmy wanted to play as much like a hard court as he possibly could have that happen. But I've been told that in pickleball, they're trying to come up with, because here in South Florida, but especially in Boca, there's so many clay courts. is that the pickleballers, and so many of them are our age, that it'd be good if they could be playing on clay for their joints. But I guess the wiffle ball they have right now is not conducive to playing on clay, correct?
Yeah, like I said, I'm still in the experimental stage on my end of it. My personal jury's still out on it, but I think that to me it makes sense. I hate seeing tennis courts being converted all into pickleball. I mean, it's just example would be the Bobby Riggs Center. I don't know if you've seen pictures of it, but that's a pretty legendary club out in Southern Cal, and it's pickleball now.
Yeah, no, I've heard that. When one of Vic's coaches, Rick Schroeder, son of Ted Schroeder, who won Wimbledon. I mean, I could say that when I would play Schroeder back in the day, I could edge him out, but he could play left-handed and right-handed equally well. And the thing is that he wasn't even a tennis player. He, was Schroeder's kid, and he played when he was really young. And he continued to play. He worked for Vic forever. But he was an All-American in 2 sports in college, golf and basketball. But he was doing some teaching there. And because, Ted Schroeder's his father, he's buddy with Bobby. And so he took me there. And so Bobby was smoking a cigar. And I was there more than one time, but it was smoking a cigar and playing cards. But to actually get to meet Bobby Riggs and hang out, Jimmy Connor's hanging around guy, Lorne Kuehl. They have a Bobby Riggs museum there too. I mean, how did that happen? But it's like, well, we got to pay the bills. And, for about the same amount of time that you've been at Wintergreen, I've been in South Florida. And before the pandemic, sometimes twice a month, we're renting a Airbnb place to bring kids to tournaments because there's more tennis, competitive tennis, better tournament play. You can go to Rick Macy's place. It's just amazing. It's very expensive, but it's just what happens there. It's like who's who in tennis shows up. It's just overall the level play could be so much better because the kids are playing very much one-dimensional tennis. There's no doubles, but it's just sad that term invading, taking the sport over, but I like what you said, experimental. So about the same amount of time you've been in Wintergreen, I mean, I have a townhouse. The backyard is 64 acres. This park, and there's pickleball. So I walk by the pickleball and just sit and watch, and it's like, okay. But the term that I learned from Dave Fish, that spec tennis, which I don't know why they changed the name. They should have just called it paddle tennis like what they had in the 40s. They still have it at Venice Beach out in California. But you play with a wooden mallet. Now it's obviously a different material, but it used to be a wooden mallet, perforated holes in it. You play with a punctured tennis ball. And there's so many stories. Gonzalez, Riggs, Althea Gibson. But a couple of things on pickleball. I like what you said, experimental. I ran into Stevie Longley, who, he was a hitting partner for Serena Williams for like 3 years. And, now he's, I think, 50, 55 years old. And he's talking to me at Rick Macy's place. So, again, you run into everybody. And I think he's got a great idea for pickleball. And if people looked it up, if you just were to put pickle ping tennis, I could be wrong, but you can find it, ping tennis, Steve Longley. I mean, I've known him since he was a kid. He's known me since where I was a hockey player hitting a ball on a backboard with no clue. But he would like to have another line and call it the oven. And you can't go forward until the ball lands. So it's more like tennis. And, you can't go forward until the ball lands in the oven. So you can't just charge the net. So this is one thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Another thing he has, and I need to know more about it, but I did look at the first video he showed me just on his phone, and I looked at a couple others, is doubles is play it like ping pong doubles. Ping pong doubles, you play mini tennis. You could do it full baseline to baseline. You have to hit every other ball. Mm-hmm. There's 2 people hitting balls, and you have to hit every other ball. And he's saying to bring exercise into it. But I see it as the 70s where people are making it up as they go along. It's booming. And what we need to do is fight for tennis and say, hey, learn tennis skills and use pickleball as a progression, and then also be learning tennis so you can play the bridge, because if you do play, like Dave Fish said, if you play spec tennis, you're just like if you played paddle tennis, like Althea Gibson, that movie League of Your Own where, Tom Hanks, Madonna, there's no crying in baseball. But during World War II, the men were all at World War II, and every town, every small, large town, there was baseball teams every weekend playing baseball teams. And that's where Althea Gibson learned to have a serve by playing baseball. But then Roosevelt wanted to have these short courts because he thought the parks, it was too much land, too much money, and have short courts. And I guess it was New York, or Gibson in that area, New York City, and then St. Louis, but the ones that are still out in California, Venice Beach, you get on YouTube and you can watch Monfils playing paddle tennis, and people can almost instantly, like they said about racquetball that became official sport in '69, Newsweek or Time Magazine, I think it was Newsweek, said that you could convert athletic skills to racquetball in an hour and a half. But to have tennis skills, it would take you a year and a half. It's like Braden used to say that, that people would buy tennis clothes and wear them to the grocery store. But now people, going back to Vic, the circle, is people can buy the tennis clothes and they can play right away. They could play at this park in the evening. I mean, this place is just packed. I mean, there's like 60 people waiting to play, and they have a great system where I think you play to 11. You put just like someone goes into a pizza pub, a bar, and they want to play pool. They just put their quarter on the table, and it's pretty much that way. But I think another thing is to play tickleball. Is just say, hey, this is tickleball. And Jim Klein touched upon that, as someone who obviously, like yourself, you went to Tennis Tech first, and then he's a Bradenite, and I say that as the highest compliment. Where he says no, you can let kids serve overhand and come in and volley, and you still can have kids go over there. And I tell my kids don't put the word pro in procrastination, but I haven't gone out and bought. I have some spec rackets that they sent me. And I did a little bit of work just, saying, hey, Dave Fish asked me to do this video for them that you can learn tennis skills. Actually, it's a girl, it was two sisters, Alanis Hamilton and their sister Enya, who've been taught by Cole Reeves, and they've been taught basically GreatBase, but Braden technique. And the younger sister is really improving. The older sister, she, really sticks out like a sore thumb because you go to a tournament and she might, you look across, 6-8 courts, and there's this one kid who can volley. We had a boy from Montreal. He was playing someone. He came in and volleyed at the Battle of Boca, and the guy on the other side said, "This is the Battle of Boca. No one volleys here." I have been told that pickleball is mostly swing volleys, but somebody could go and say, "I'm just going to have fun, and I'm going to play pickleball to improve my tennis game." Yeah. Just like juniors, these we see these men once or twice a week, I guess twice a week, and throughout Florida, and they're disappearing, but this park has 16 three-wall racquetball courts. And, I've never been there one time where the backboards aren't open, but generally the men take one side. It's a great place to pick up on your profanity. These guys are, they're all between 65 and dead. And they are just swearing at each other, and it's very comical. And I think it's actually good for the juniors. It's like, okay, no more virgin ears. You go to one junior tournament, you lose your virgin ears. And but they're just swearing at each other. And but my point is that they're okay. Someone's 7 or someone's 70. They just want to win. Of course, you want to win, but don't you have some tricks up your sleeve where I'm going to do this now so I can do this later. I don't think that, people are thinking, well, down the road, when I'm 18, I'm going to be able to come to the net instead of, can you imagine some kid going to college? I feel so sorry for college coaches that
Yeah.
Kids show up and they don't even know where to stand when they're playing doubles. But no, I think that because you're the tennis director, obviously, and I think that's an important point to share over and over again is Club Corp has. Go ahead.
I've had to embrace that. Yeah, I'd say one other little thing too is just like being the tennis family. I think pickleball. I see a lot of families playing it. We have a lot of guests that come up that the whole family gets out. And my own family, my daughter, who ended up playing, college tennis at Boise State, but as a junior, I didn't really push her that hard because I always told her, I said, when I'm 80 years old, will you still hit with me? And she said, yeah. And some of my best moments in my entire life have been when I would work with my daughter and we'd sit down and have a conversation on the bench. And sometimes it was about tennis, but most of the time it was about other things. And
I know that
I got a great relationship with her because of that. And, is keeping everything in perspective. I think there's a time for competitive and there was a time to be, really on it. But then there's another side that I've always wanted her to be able to have this sport that, like I said, what I've gained out of it in my life is I want her to, feel that way and that, that she'll pass that on to her kids and kind of keep this sport going. I ask a lot of parents too. I'm getting these calls and, and a lot of these kids are pretty young that, they're looking for a program or looking to come to you. And I literally asked a lot of these parents, I said, well, do you play tennis? And some of them don't. And I'm like, well, I said, well, you should, it's not too late. You got it. If your kid's doing it, you should play it. You'll know a little bit how it feels and all of that.
No, and it's like Braden, who loved basketball. His first love really is that you can just go out and dribble. You just go shoot in the driveway. You don't have to be in a game. You can just okay, let's just get a rally going from the service line. No, I was fortunate enough to be on the court with your daughter Corey with what I mentioned. A great kid. Reflective behavior. That's a compliment to you and Colleen. With Club Corp, I always say, they got 200 directors, and there's a safe bet that each culture is different from one facility to the next because it's determined by the tennis director or the head coach or whatever the title may be. But yourself being the tennis director, you certainly want to honor pickleball. But and I was at your place. Let me ask you. I don't remember. Do you have the 10 and under lines on your indoor courts? I mean, obviously you don't have them on your clay courts, but do you have them on your indoor courts?
No.
That's where, it's obviously not mandatory, but it turns into a very good teaching aid. Vic used to say, because people would complain about the 10 and under lines. And when you go into a gym and you're a basketball player and they've got lines for badminton and volleyball, you're the basketball player, you know where your lines are. And, Vic did so much research on the brain. We don't get around. We have a lot of clever progressions on teaching emergency shots that we've gathered from here and there and everywhere. And, many times, and actually I'm looking to make a change for that for the upcoming winter season where, we haven't been advertising and, our students send two students and we have people come to us who have to rebuild their games. And that's a very tough undertaking. I do think that Wintergreen would be a very good place to teach parents and coaches the pathway of developing a player. This is what you can do at home. This is what you can do off the court. But I think also, with pickleball, it's like when people play squash, Braden with the brain, that Harry Hopman used to have his players like a laver play squash with their opposite hand, so they wouldn't be imbalanced and not overuse the laver side, the left side.
Yeah.
But that to have as a tennis director, obviously tough job to keep everybody happy, but to have juniors go out and play pickleball, play with your left hand, but play like a tennis player, split step, get a ready position, hit the wiffle ball. Like say, we're just not as smart as they are in other sports. As if a kid was playing wiffle ball years ago. Like I could never hit a baseball. I mean, I had a better chance of hitting a softball. And I always tease, once they came up with that watermelon-sized bat, I could hit a wiffle ball. 7, 8 years, 7, 8 years old. But when you were playing wiffle ball, you tried to take the same swing as the people in the major leagues. You didn't go out and say, well, I can swing at this wiffle ball any way I want. And, I know tennis is different. It's a series of balls coming at you. It's random. It's not just, okay, here's one pitch and we wait. Here's one pitch and we wait. But, no, we in tennis, that term united, I don't want to get political in the U.S., but, we need to be united. Now the left and right are too far apart and there's no center. But I do think that the USPTA, united, the USTA united. And, so pickleball, it's interesting. I think.
Well, you're talking about the lines on the court. Is that I think there's a deal of court awareness. Like you said, when you play, if you're aware of the dimensions of the court for your sport, where the line is. It's good. Like ball, you're at the net, the ball goes over you. If that's going to be pretty darn close to the baseline. If somebody lobs you, and I think it's a little bit of like my own membership is they're very accepting of having those other lines out there. They're very accepting of it. And but I've been at clubs where they're not. But I think that was a little earlier on, and it wasn't quite in that transition period. So I think our club, and I think you kind of alluded to it, but it's a little reflective of the directors and the staff and all. Is we kind of embrace all of that, but I'm still pretty much tennis purist. So,
well, at this park in pickleball, if you want to come and bring your own jam box and play music loud, if you want to bring your dog or your dogs, it's definitely, it's not a quiet please. And who knows? I mean. Will there be scholarships for pickleball? Will we have? I don't think that there's going to be like we in tennis have 4 Super Bowls. But yeah, I think as a tennis director, I think Stevie Longley has a great line to have that second line and say, okay, here's some different ways to play it. And I think the one thing about pickleball, I heard Chuck Gill say this a long time ago. Somebody who's been a leader with the USPTA. I mean, I never worked at the same place with Chuck, but we both worked at All American Sports in the 70s, and he's had a lifetime successful career in tennis. It's such a casual sport. And, you used to be able to show up at a park and somebody be hitting the backboard and say, hey, you want to hit some balls? And, now there's not so many backboards, but yeah, I think that we have to join them. I mean, I think, I hear one mom that I talk to quite a bit about pickleball is just that we need to beat them. And show up but you beat them with being taught tennis skills, and then the prevention of injury. Say for a volley comes right at you, you want to play a backhand volley because of the range of motion. But the way people are playing pickleball, it's just this swiping action where they bring their palm back into their body, and the term dinkum, that's used in mini tennis circles.
Yeah.
But yeah, pickleball. No, I think it's great that you have a place that's separated, but at the same time, I like what you said about families. The other thing too is just become athletic. But at the same time, Ryler DeHart, who, Ryler's background, he started with Thomas Olsted. I did video work for Ryler, really from the beginning days when he started as a young kid, and then he spent years working with me, and then he went to college. He played for Tiley, so he was, but he was around the core knowledge, the core information for a long time. And his wife Megan, who's a very good tennis player, played at Illinois. I guess she's like 4 in the world, but so as young kids I saw him hit some pickleball. I saw them. Hit pickleballs, is that how you would say it? They were playing pickleball, I just think that it's like, okay, let's have that be an alternate pathways. Okay, yeah, you can play pickleball, and With at your place, rules and regulations, can kids go on your courts and play mini tennis? Can they take a tennis ball and hit?
Yeah, they for sure could.
But you
I mean, like you said,
you allow that, right?
oh yeah, I will allow that.
Because I
sure would.
I know some people are having problems where at this park is the pickleball players. They go and they'll just jump on a tennis court and play pickleball. There's no lines, but the court's empty, and they don't want to wait with the 50, 60 plus. But it's, if you show up on the pickleball courts and you're playing tennis, there's no regulation. So the people who want to, there's an empty pickleball court. Right now, right now we're getting outnumbered where it's like, okay, there's, let's see how many people are playing tennis, how many people are playing pickleball. And, perhaps you're in this area where there's a lot of retirees. Maybe that's the case too, because there's more older people.
When you were saying that earlier, is I think, every property has its own, its own demographics, personality, and for me, it's always, every property I've gone to has been different. I can't say everyone's the same, but it's, just kind of getting the bead for what it is here. But I think we've got a pretty strong set of tennis camp, and then we've got some that cross over to pickleball, and then just some that like, just pickleball. So, but it's, I think formats are a big part of things too. Like in tennis, I still think, I like the doubles, that cross court doubles, the doubles shootout format. Colleen, you talked about her a little earlier. She played soft tennis in Asia, which is kind of using something similar to a squash racket with a racket ball, and you're playing kind of like ghost doubles, playing the half court tennis. It has a little different set of rules, but that's big in Asia, and I could see variations of that going with tennis too.
Oh, the UTR, they just came out with it's a promotional. I don't know the details.
Oh, the Dingles.
Yeah, and the Dingles. There's, okay, we're going to go cross court. You go cross court. How long can you keep the ball in play? And you, as a coach, you can add variables. Okay, count to 20 and then play. So you got to hit 20 ground strokes. There's 4 people on the court hitting cross court. But how we do it, as soon as the point's over, I should say, as soon as one pair misses, there's 4 people on the court. Everybody just goes to the net. You just close in. But the tape I looked at was they were playing Dingles where you didn't have to go forward. But I think people, old school, and I don't like that term so much, old school, no school. How's it go? Old school, new school. There is no school. Is that you play Dingles, you're rallying cross court. You could do it where it's up the line, but you make a game. But also too is that, no, come on, we're not going to play until we can at least hit 10 balls 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
And then you have to switch because you don't want to just be always hitting cross court backhands or vice versa. But yeah, the commissioner of tennis is someone who's in charge of tennis for the day, is that Dingles should be, hey, hit ground strokes, boom, go to the net. And I think that we in tennis could capitalize. And I remember when Agassi first came on the scene and was playing swing volleys, it was like taboo. It was like, no, you can't do that. So tennis has evolved. Years ago, people weren't playing swing volleys because, 3 of the 4, they were, but it wasn't as prevalent. 3 of the 4 Grand Slams, la-di-da, were on grass. And by the second week, players were wearing spikes and, the speed of the ball. The players yesteryear were great, but it was almost twice as slow. And that's where people miss out. They look at it and go, oh, it's not any good. Yeah, look how slow they play. But yeah, look at the skill set. And again, coming back to so many things we talked about, Laver and Connors, somebody watches that, they're not going, and that was, 1975. We're going on almost 50 years ago. It's like unbelievable tennis.
Pickleball, something I've learned about pickleball is that, like in the tournaments, people like the balls to be rough. They scuff up the ball. The reason for that is because it creates that little air friction, and you can actually get spin on it. I have a pro that started playing in pickleball tournaments, and the officials come around and actually check your paddle to make sure it's not like sandpaper. And another thing they said, they make sure that nobody sprayed it with like hairspray or anything. All that's doing is it gets it a bite on the ball where you actually get spin. spin is pretty darn effective. I've noticed this myself playing with pickleball, but I think it's still in its infancy about some of those rules about what you can do with the ball. And I think the instructional part, I think there's guys that are, it's kind of like the deal about rolling your wrist after the ball is hit, it's off your racket, and somebody's still trying to create spin by rolling the wrist. Pickleball's still in that little deal where there's a lot of misnomers about the physics of hitting a ball, and but I think that's a big opening in pickleball instruction too. Is just that there's not enough people that understand the physics of what happens, and it's a physics problem.
With boy, it's great for people learning how to hit half volleys, but with that though, the wise guy used to tell people, you play tennis like a naval commander. What do you mean? What do you mean? Your belly button's always facing the net. People playing pickleball, and granted, tennis ball only weighs 2 ounces, but they're just not turning. They're they're not. It's just most players. It's instruction, destruction, but it's pretty easy to pick out someone. I mean, if they played at a, not a club level, but they played, say, 4-5, which is a good tennis player. They play, 4-5 or higher. Let's talk a little bit about logistics. Wintergreen, I'm excited to come up. I know a couple coaches coming to help me. We'll interface with your staff, and we're getting the word out. I know a lot of people are going to come and spend some time. But housing and transportation, why don't you touch upon that? So, here, we're dealing with smaller numbers. We've got 2 airports 30 minutes away. Occasionally we have to go down to Miami, but is there shuttles from?
Wintergreen does have shuttles, and I think when we know where people are staying, I think we can for sure get a shuttle service going for them. The housing up there, there's an inn. It wouldn't be your traditional hotel type, but it's kind of a studio type rooms with a small kind of kitchenette, and it ranges out to rental homes that are part of the Wintergreen rental pool, which are can be 2-bedroom up to a 9-bedroom homes, and they're pretty nice. All these have most of the bigger ones have just beautiful overlooks of the valleys and all, but so it's pretty wide range, but it wouldn't be like your traditional like a hotel type setting. And I think that actually adds to the environment here a little bit too.
On this end of it, when people, for years, I guess I'm spoiled in that sense where if I go someplace, people are going to find where I am and come and work with me. And but I'd say what most people do now is we don't tell them what hotel is. They just get on the internet. And so at your place, there's housing through the Wintergreen company, but then there's private housing as well.
Yeah. There's a bit of both, and I think for those people that, like you said, that have the RV lifestyle too, there's plenty of areas to park one of those. It's a really, like I said, it's a very unique setting. There's places down in the valley, but there's also places up in the mountains for that kind of a.
So if someone stays at the bottom of the mountain, there's nearby hotels at the bottom of the mountain.
No, not. There's cabins and stuff like that. Like I said, it's kind of it's a bit of a rural setting, not a beat down rural setting, but it's an upscale rural area. That's why you have wineries and all. It's not.
Well, I know that you the wineries that'll loosen you up. Yeah. But I think with summer number 1, if it could go into summer number 2. We've talked about some spin-off programs. I think summer number 1, we have certainly people are going to be listening to this. We're I guess getting commercial. We're actually we're marketing right now. So, but with parents, if they rent a place, they can bring other juniors. That's where they could even rent a house, and one set of parents could come, or one parent could come for 1 week, and another parent could come for the next week. And I think if it was summer number 2, it'd be easier to be organizing that. But
yeah, I think that's I knew like in Texas back in, like I said, when I traveled in the days when it was coaches, when you take a whole van load of kids to something, there's something kind of fun about a group all staying in the same place, and I think that thing about making new friends, that's a big quotient of that. Like I said, as a junior when I played, I remember playing, all the way to Lubbock and down in Houston. There's times I actually, as a kid, I'd met families at tournaments, and, we were planning on coming down, and they'd say, well, you guys can, why don't we all stay together, and we did a lot of that, even though these are people you're going to be competing against, and, it's just fine, and I think really in a lot of ways, tennis could have a lot more of that too,
but it is separate, the food and lodging. People could organize that on their own. I know with the easiest way to do it is, the kids, say, well, how do you do it without a dormitory? I think that the powers to be, the leaders of your company would have to see it, but you could have kids. I don't see that happening initially, because they'd have to look into all the liability issues. But I've run tennis camps where you have an air mattress, and you get a sleeping bag, and you can go buy each for $10 each, and you just turn the courts at night into the dormitory. But with your place, I think with the idea is that it's a pathway for parents to come and learn, the attitude of the household, the lifestyle. How do you bring up a tennis player? And I don't think that many people really know. I hate to say that, but it really comes down to this is where we get accused of doom and gloom and being pessimistic. But why do we have 62% on the men's side, 60% on the women's side, foreign tennis players? Why we lose people from tennis? They start and they leave the sport. Education, with too much emphasis on, who's going to win the 10 and under tournament, instead of let's just learn to play the sport. And then also,
exactly.
And then also too, and that comes back to pickleball, is we've lost the kid being a multiple sport athlete. Now if you interview most young kids or their parents, it's like, well, they either play one sport or they don't play any. And I love what you said, touched on many things, but a golden nugget from this is where you said, I just like kids to be outside. Like go play.
Yeah. I didn't quite know what indoor tennis was till I was about 16. I can say that in Texas. There's so few places.
I'll tell you, I was 35 before I worked for Tennis Corporation of America. I traveled and taught quite a bit in indoor settings, but I do appreciate the overhead, and it's not the one in tennis where indoor costs. But that's another thing too, is that you can teach so many people on one indoor court. We have 10 backboards being built that are going to say Wintergreen on them to bring up to your place, and you just get it. That's when you sit at a table, and understandably, I wouldn't have any idea how a place like Winter Haven functions. It's such a big operation. But it could just be a tennis club. It's like, well, how's membership work, and how's the restaurant work?
Yeah.
But that's where it's like how to make tennis work. And we just, and that's where I would like to see people who direct programs or club owners, come and find out, this is how you get it done. When you want to take over, that's a pretty aggressive term, but you're going to take over a tennis facility, and you're going to inherit the junior program. Say you go in as a tennis director, and there's already, pro staff, 6 to 12 tennis coaches. Just so many pieces to the puzzle, and it's like, okay, how are we gonna transition this in pro sports? They get a new head coach. I mean, the head coach brings in his whole staff. Say, okay, this is what we're gonna do. But no, I think that a number of people doesn't. I think that a lot they'll think it's a junior camp, but I would say anybody who's interested in learning about developmental tennis could benefit by coming to what we can do together at Wintergreen.
Exactly. No, it's solution oriented.
Yeah, I'll end with one thing. That's good, solution oriented.
Yeah.
I think end with one thing. I one time had a poster. Who knows? Maybe you made the poster back in the heyday. Is that we had a Vic Braden. Vic Braden would come in, and on Friday night it would be in an auditorium, and I'd try to get as many people as I could. I mean, even people like to play golf because Vic, just, hey Vic, we got golfers, we got everybody in the audience. But with one of the last phrases was, it was like bullet points. The Friday night seminar is for boom, 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 and the last bullet point was for anybody who wants to laugh. And Braden goes, "Can I get a copy of that poster?" So there you go, documentation. Yeah. How about you sending us off here with a note? It's been great to have you on. I know there's a lot of nuggets from this that the listeners will really enjoy, benefit from.
I'd sign off with a thank you to you, and I think the good quote is "Laugh and win." I'm going to stay with that one. I've had a good time. It's a big circle. I've had a lot of laughter along the way, but it's been darn good. So follow your bliss.
Yeah, no, laugh and win. I used to tell Vic, I don't get the laugh part.
No,
I mean, way back when I was with Vic, I mean, some of the guys on his staff thought I could go and do amateur night at one of those laugh stops, one of those where they have amateurs get up and grab the microphone and try to get people to laugh. And Vic also
there's that psychological component to that about laughter, though, about relaxing.
Yeah. Swearing makes you relax a little bit too. Makes your heart rate. Makes your heart rate go down. Long as it's just brief, but
it depends where it's directed. But it's someone else or it's yourself.
Yeah. With junior tennis, Vic used to say, before he started coaching juniors, I was 6'3" and thin, and I tell people I used to have a full head of hair. But no, I do think that, I told someone just today, coach from Poland who actually his wife, Carla Navarro, now Wojciech, she's been on our podcast, is people just need to have fun and that sense of enjoyment. I was just telling him today that it's when the kids are all stressed out and the coaches are, it's like, okay, you mirror they're out there and they're just all uptight about winning and losing. And, Vic used to say so many things. If 1 million people play, 500,000 lose today. And don't change. It's okay to lose the match, but don't lose the lesson. And, but just that laugh and win part is, there's, sign off Jimmy Connors. I say this once a week anyway, is that the greatest thing in life, and he got this from Bobby Riggs, be in the game. I just love, where did that come from? Find the source. The source. Is the greatest thing in life is to play tennis and win. The second greatest thing in life is to play tennis and lose. But at the same time, it's Bradenisms. If you have an engineering problem, you have a lousy serve. That's Pete Sampras's word. He didn't follow you to say, that's lousy. Read his autobiography. But if it's crummy, it's crummy. If you have a lousy serve, you're not going to have that much fun. And I think that's one thing about pickleball too, is that right now you can have lousy everything and have fun playing pickleball. And so we in tennis need to go, okay, but we need to be missionary zeal for promoting our game and say, hey, play pickleball this way, because you can also then play tennis. And I do think that there's an invisible tsunami coming for the people who are playing pickleball that aren't playing pickleball with any thought of biomechanics. And that, I love that invisible tsunami. I tell juniors all the time, that might even pat myself on the back being an original thought, is that invisible tsunami is just going to wipe out players. It's like, what happened? It's like, no, you got to a certain level. And tennis is a triangle. In other words, if you keep competing, you just keep going to a higher level of that triangle, and it's the peak of a mountain. But we have said that, ending with the peak of a mountain, is that I'm excited to, with you, present a mountain of information on a mountainside resort.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. I'm going to write that on a bathroom wall. But Steve-O, all the best. I look forward to joining you. I know we're talking on a regular basis. But it's been fantastic to talk to you, and thank you.
I want to see a lot of bodies up here. All right.
Yeah, we. How's it go? In the movie, it was. It's really build it and he will come, but it's been changed to build it and they will come. That's a great word. It takes a lot to build a tennis player. All right, Steve-O.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you. All the best. We'll be. All right. Adios.
Okay. Bye, brother. All right. Bye.
All right, listeners. Podcast 134 is in the books. I'm going to shut up because I know it's been a long podcast, but I do tell, even we'd like to, even some of the juniors, it would take, if it's 3 hours, a marathon, it would take 1% of the week for people. So listen to it 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And I like to tell people too, is that you're not so much listening to me. Tonight you had the opportunity to listen to Steve Campbell, but there's some nuggets that really come from history, and you really don't know your subject matter unless you know the history. All right, thanks. I'm out. Good night.